Hello and welcome to the Game Theory Podcast. I'm your host, Sam Vicini. We're presented by CLNS Media. Today on the show, we are down to our second to last episode of this big, massive prospect breakdown series that Cole Zwicker and I are doing. Cole is obviously on the other line with me here. We're going to talk about the Clippers, the Lakers, and the Warriors in this episode. So we're getting big market basketball, and we're also putting in the biggest market college basketball team here at the top as well. We're going to talk about the Duke Blue Devils playing Ryerson last night. RJ Barrett and Zion Williamson, really the only 2 points of discussion there because Cam Reddish, Trey Jones, Alex O'Connell didn't play for the most part in O'Connell's case. O'Connell played like a little bit, right?
I think he played for the first, I don't know how long, but it was only into the first quarter a little bit, and then he got injured. He didn't come back in.
Yeah, he broke his face, from what I understand.
Yes.
So yeah, I was going to say, I feel like I remember him playing, but really I was just focused on Barrett and Zion. We'll talk about those two and, just kind of bring up whatever comes up because I just finished writing about, RJ Barrett. I have 3,000 words on him coming on Friday over at The Athletic. So this is going to be one of those episodes that kind of leads nicely into something that I've written. But before we get into that, Cole, how are you doing, man?
I'm doing well. Not quite as busy in the writing department as you, apparently, but I'm clinging to these summer college games, the Bahamas games, the Kentucky and the Duke games in Canada like lifelines, man, getting desperate.
Yeah, no, that's what I've been doing. I wrote about Kentucky on Monday. I wrote about RJ for Friday. I'm just really trying to continue to stay engaged here with college basketball. Plus, I'm going to Australia next week, so I have to record a bunch of podcasts before that as well, just because I'm not going to be looking at things while that's happening. So I'm excited here. Our sponsor today is RX Bar. We'll talk about them a little bit later on, but before we get into them, let's talk about Duke. Cole, as I start every Duke discussion, I have a very simple, very solid question to ask you. Is Duke back?
I actually think so. Frankly, when they get all of their pieces together, I think the spacing is obviously going to be a little bit of a crunch, but Cam will help that. Trey Jones facilitating the offense. We saw yesterday it looked a little disorganized, which is to be expected with their first overall game together. But I do think Duke's back. They're going to have a different dynamic this year as far as a lot more switchability on the perimeter. The perimeter defense should be far better than last year. They don't have Wendell Carter kind of protecting the back end. I don't think Marcus Bolden's anywhere close to him, but they do have the infrastructure on the perimeter now to really play more of a switching scheme. And hopefully we see more man defense. I mean, that's the key here is they don't really have to play zone as far as their personnel this year. So we'll see how that kind of plays out.
Yeah, no, I'm very interested in the man defense because they actually have personnel to play incredible man defense, I think. Look at a guy like Cameron Reddish, 6'7", 7'1" wingspan. Definitely someone who needs to get more engaged in the game regularly when we see him for the first time after this trip and into the college basketball season. And before we do our big prospect breakdown that I'm sure we'll do in the preseason, we'll talk about some of the questions we have about Cam. But you look at him, he has the tools. You look at RJ Barrett, has the motor and the tools and the length and everything you look for. Zion Williamson can be an incredible switchable five in the college game that can also really protect the rim just because he is the biggest physical freak I think I've ever seen since LeBron James when he was young. So that's kind of what we're talking about when we're talking about a very real potential high-end defensive team with Duke. I would probably not start Marquise Bolden. I would start Zion at the 5. But my guess is that they kind of told Marquise that if he stuck around that they would start him. So I'm just kind of assuming that early in the year it's going to be the Marquise show.
If K started Zion at the 5, I think I'd have an aneurysm. Personally, I would be so ecstatic. I would probably attend Duke games live in that case, but I don't see it happening. So I was kind of working under the impression that Zion will probably start at the 4, getting in that bigger rim protector. It kind of seems like Duke. I mean, they're not going to play as big as they played yesterday with Delorier at the 4, just because, of course, they didn't have Cam Reddish. They didn't have enough of the perimeter personnel. I think they're going to be a little bit underrated offensively. Of course, they're going to kill in transition because they're going to have better athletes than basically anybody on the floor. But what makes this team a little different is like if you don't guard RJ Barrett on the weak side, like he can shoot. He didn't shoot that well off the catch, but I like his mechanics for the most part. I think he'll be a solid catch and shoot 3 guy. But both him and Zion Williamson, those guys can really eat up space. If you let them work up ahead of steam with an open lane to the rim, they're going to get to the rim and they're going to be able to finish because they're that athletic. So that's kind of what gives them a different dynamic. It's not just these guys are skeptical shooters. It's like if you leave them avenues as cutters or as weak side attackers to the basket, they're going to make you pay.
Yeah, and I'm not sure how much of Tre Jones you've seen, but I've seen him quite a bit on AAU levels and like on the circuit. Very, very good up-tempo player that also plays within himself, plays poised, always headmans the ball. Very similar to Tyus Jones, not surprisingly given the fact that they're brothers, but very similar in the way that they operate and they consistently look to make the right play. It's kind of the perfect point guard to have with athletes like this around him. So, yeah, I mean, I would expect them to have like a top 6 offense in college basketball. The defense, though, like they have potential to have a top 10 defense. The problem is that, you look back through Duke's recent history defensively, it's not great. It really is quite bad. I would say, even just given what their, floor slapping and all of that reputation is. Last year, they ended up 9th in adjusted defense, but they switched to that zone because they couldn't defend early in the year. The zone was incredible. It was very, very effective for them, but I would be surprised if they did that again, just given what K seems to like to do. 47th in 2017, 86 in 2016, 11 in 2015 when Jahlil Okafor was there and they had that late run in the regular season and into the tournament. I think they were like 60th going into the NCAA tournament, though, in adjusted, maybe going into the ACC tournament in adjusted defense. 86th in 2014, 26th in 2013, 79th in 2012. Over the course of time here, since 2012, since Duke started recruiting one and dones, they've been a shitty defense. It's fine to call out. I mean, they've been incredible during that time. I mean, they've been to however many Elite Eights, a couple extra Sweet 16s. They won a title. Like, it's fine to say that they were bad on defense, but they've been bad on defense.
Yeah, and I think some of that has to fall on K here. He's kind of the common denominator.
I am all for having things fall on K. Like, you don't have to explain. You can just say, this is K's fault. I'm here for it.
Well, I mean, this year, we'll kind of see. They definitely have better athletes than they've had in the past. We're not dealing with Grayson Allen and Luke Kennard on the perimeter. Now we have RJ Barrett, Cam Reddish, Zion Williamson. There really isn't an excuse as far as just an athletic standpoint. Like, they can switch basically everything. They can employ more modern NBA schemes that we've seen. Just a lot of that. They have the personnel to do that. But you are starting 4 freshmen. That's the thing, is how disciplined are they going to be? Like, we can get into this a little bit with Duke yesterday, but I didn't expect them to be fully engaged off the ball. I thought RJ had a couple nice rotations on the weak side to get some steals. Zion was floating a lot off the ball. He was chasing blocks. So it's just going to come down to me, to how good are they technically, how good are they disciplined, their awareness on the weak side, because these are young kids. I think it's hard to have an elite defense when you don't have that discipline, even if you are super athletic, because you can lapse off the ball, give up threes and stuff like that. But for me, it just comes down to the fact they have the ingredients to be a high-level defense. It's just how they execute that's really going to make the difference here. Yeah, no,
I agree with you wholeheartedly. Let's kind of jump into RJ and Zion. I mean, RJ, everyone was really excited. He goes for 34 points. He took 30 shots to get there, but whatever, I guess. Really, it's worth, again, noting that Alex O'Connell, Cam Reddish, and Tre Jones, how the fuck I came up with Alex O'Connell first of that trio is bananas to me. But those 3 missed this entire game. Those are 3 of their 5 best shot creators. It was a situation where literally RJ Barrett and Zion Williamson scored every shot but one in the first half because they were really the only guys who could do anything against Ryerson. It shows how good they are that they were able to beat Ryerson just with those 2 and beat them by 17 points, if I remember the final score correctly. But it was ridiculous how much of a workload these guys had to take on throughout the course of this game.
Well, and you touched on the Tre Jones effect. I did see him at Hoop Summit. I'm not totally buying his jump shot, and that's why I'm kind of lukewarm on his pro projection. But for a college point guard, I think he's going to be absolutely outstanding, makes really good decisions. And that's kind of something we saw out of the gate a little bit. RJ was kind of playing the de facto point guard. I think he can do that in college, but I don't know if he can really do that full time and really make the full repertoire of decision making. I don't know if I want him initiating the offense every single play. Not sure if he's ready for that at his age, maybe as the season progresses, but I think that you saw that manifest on the floor a little bit. They were a little uncomfortable to start the game, a little bit of an ugly game, but then, I mean, RJ Barrett, Zion Williamson, by far the two best athletes on the floor. Zion was really impressive to me. The functional athleticism that we saw from him across the board, that's something that I think gets swept under the rug a little bit with him. You see the and one mixtape kind of lower level dunks, but like, he exerts that on the floor. Like his rebounding, he was getting up, skying for boards. He was really agile with the ball. I thought his ball handling, that is what really unleashes a lot of his athleticism. He's got such a good first step, but he's got really controlled handle. Saw a couple of sequences in transition there yesterday. And just passing, he made a couple really nice reads, quick decisions. Like he had this one spin move on the baseline, skipped it across to the opposite corner, and then ended up getting like a ridiculous offensive rebound in the same sequence. So I was just really impressed with their athleticism. When you get those guys going downhill in the open court, it's over. We saw RJ run through guys in transition. Zion is just, he's going through guys, he's going around guys. So they just have elite athletes, and it's really going to shine in a setting like this.
Yeah, no question. Ryerson is a very, very good Canadian college team, but they're not like a great team by any stretch of the imagination. Like they're not going to be a top 25 team in college basketball that's going to provide the kind of high level athleticism that is necessary to really test these guys. Let's start with RJ, I guess. We can just kind of point out that, I think he made one or two threes, but mostly got everything going toward the basket. Got it all. Not all of it, but most of it during early offense or in transition, just as he always does. That's a big thing that I think we need to watch this year. How capable is he of beating guys off the dribble from a standstill, in creating his shot from a standstill versus being able to do it when he gets out on the move and on the break? Because he is an incredible athlete. Whenever he has a head of steam, he can rise up and throw down poster dunks, but he is not the kind of guy that, can just kind of create his own momentum. Like I think Duke should be running him in a lot of dribble handoff plays, should be running him in a lot of like pin down screens where he comes around at a full head of steam and takes the ball and continues to attack the basket. That's where you want him. I think that it's going to be interesting to see how Duke utilizes him because of that.
I think that's a great point. And I recently wrote about RJ Barrett on the step-in and basically said that exact same thing. In the half court, the ball slows him down a little bit because he's not as dynamic with his long strides. We did see that Euro step at the end of the game. That was my favorite play of his last night. That's where I think he's kind of special, is when he can actually get into space, and he is so good when he gets into open space. He can use those long strides. He has a little bit of agility there, can step around. He can step around guys pretty much at will. So that's his best trait, in my opinion, his slashing aggressiveness when he really gets space. He's really good there. But as far as initiating an offense from a standstill, the key with him, the swing skill, is going to be his pull-up shot. And last night it looked, I'm sure you're going to touch on this in the article, but it did not look good. I mean, his misses on pull-ups were bad, and he needs to get that footwork down, the balance down. If he can hit a pull-up three, that's really going to stretch his game open, because then you have to chase over the top. And when he gets you on his hip, he's so strong, he can get into the lane then. It's just when you get him in a straight one-on-one creation setting, I don't think his handle is elite. He's not that shifty. It's more like he's good at getting around guys with his strides. So I think his handle intersection with his pull-up shot, for the most part, if you're projecting him to be like a primary kind of creator at the next level, those are the two elements of his game you really have to look for.
Yeah, let's start with the pull-up, because the pull-up is what scares me most about him right now.
Yes.
He doesn't get enough action, I think, from his lower body. It's all arms whenever he pulls up, and his legs get very straight. He just doesn't get enough momentum coming up from his lower half. I think that's fixable. You already look at the jump shot changes in general. It is a situation where he is getting his hand up under the ball a little bit more consistently. He has the ball in his shooting pocket, in a more consistent shooting pocket, a little bit better. That's something Drew Hanlon really specializes in, working with guys on, getting them into their proper shooting pocket and making it so that it's repeatable and consistent. I think that the small mechanical changes that you can see, like he used to shoot the ball a little bit further out in front of his face, he used to shoot the ball with a wavering release point, despite the fact that he made shots because his touch is so ridiculous. I'm not saying he's a bad shooter before, but these are the things that he'll have to do to become an elite shooter. these are things that will help him long term, but he isn't there yet as a jump shooter. And if there's one thing that is going to tank his potential long-term viability, I think it is that. I think that he needs to become a more consistent mid-range pull-up shooter, more consistent three-point pull-up shooter.
I absolutely agree 100%. And I think I'd like to see him pop into his shots a little bit more, like take some pop steps, get some good knee bend, and just go quickly, load quickly into your shot. Don't see that enough with him. Just he can transfer his energy better on his release overall.
It's rhythm.
I look at
his shot really doesn't have great rhythm.
It doesn't. And I think yesterday you saw a little bit of the balance issues, just didn't set all the time. So he took some contested pull-ups that I wasn't really a fan of. But I think that'll come in time. Like, he can create space, I think, on step backs in time. He's been working on that. I think I touched on that when we did the Hoop Summit podcast. And I think that in time he might be able to get that shot down. He has the athleticism and the strides to separate. It's just going to be kind of a process. I view his shooting overall as kind of a process, unless he's straight catch and shoot. Like, I've seen some really nice catch and shoot possessions from him where he has everything going. Like, he bends his knees. He has great load into his shot. He optimizes his energy transference. It's just really smooth overall. And I think you can see you can tell that he's been coached by someone like Drew Hannon with his input there. Like, Zion's completely different, where it's a lot of things that it just looks like he has ever really gotten instruction with his shot. Like, RJ looks like he has that. It's just going to be kind of a work in progress. But I agree, on the ball, you really got to look for that pull-up ability. Off the ball, I want to see if he can shoot off motion a little bit, because right now it's mostly he's a set shooter. He has to have his feet set. He can quickly hop into stuff like that. I think he's pretty adept there, at least adept enough on the college level. But can he come off a down screen and shoot quickly? That's going to be the kind of things you look for. And this also goes down to what you think of him as a pro. How are you projecting him on the ball? Are you projecting him as more of a lead ball handler potentially, or is it a wing type? And if he's a wing type, he's got to have a little bit more shot diversity to his game. On ball, needs that pull up and maybe improve his handle a little bit.
Yeah, I agree with you on all that. I do think he's an underrated passer.
Yes.
Also think, though, that you want him as like a secondary creator, not your primary guy, just because he's better at passing on drive and kickouts from the wing than he is as like a passer on a primary initiator role.
I agree with that. I think he does have some good tape as a primary as far as making the pocket pass. He can make the skip pass read, but I generally agree. I think he's better in like an open kind of driving lane, drive and kick scenario where he can really get his head up and see the floor. But I do see the makings of someone that can potentially initiate your offense pretty consistently, maybe not full-time. Like, I'm not sure if he's ever going to, of course, get to like a James Harden level. But again, a lot of this comes down to the pull-up threat, because I think he really needs that to really open up his first step and all of that. Because, again, I don't really see a ton of shake to his game. He relies more on just beating guys around the corner with his strides.
Yep, for sure. And let's talk about Zion, because Zion probably had the most interesting game of the two. Looked incredible. He looked like a top 3 pick last night, which is a great sign. Like, he's someone that, if I remember correctly, you're going to have him at like number 3 on your board entering the year, right?
Correct. Yeah, I have him in this tier 1 with RJ and Nasir. I don't really know about established role. I think I had him tentatively at 3, but it could move up.
Yeah, like I think I'll have him at 4 or 5. And like in a second tier, like I'll have RJ on a tier by himself, because I think RJ is just very clearly the best guy. And then I'll have like the rest of these guys in a big conglomeration, and Zion will be in that group. The thing with Zion for me that just continually strikes me every time I watch him, he is unbelievable in terms of being a fluid athlete with body control that also can probably touch the top of the backboard leaping. And be 285 pounds. Like, he looks in transition, he looks more like LeBron than any player I can remember, just because of that intersection of athleticism. Doesn't have the handle LeBron did, doesn't have the like all of the actual like ball skills that LeBron did, but he is an underrated guy in terms of his handle. He is an underrated guy in terms of his passing ability. Like, there is legitimate like kind of point forward skill there. He can grab and go and lead a break on his own because of the passing ability. Having said that, it's just so freaky to watch him. He's so different.
Yeah, I think we talked about this on the draft podcast last year with Ayton, and you said that Ayton is the most physically imposing, kind of dominant presence since LeBron in the draft. And obviously that didn't encompass Zion because he wasn't in that class, but I think it's Zion. I think that I look at him, I'm not saying he's LeBron, of course. The odds are that he's definitely not going to be LeBron. But as far as physically imposing at 280 pounds, I don't know if we've seen this level of speed to power athleticism. I mean, Ben Rubin, who writes for the Stepien, made a fantastic comp. Vince Carter athletically in the body of a Larry Johnson type. That's kind of what he is, which when you think about it, conceptually is absolutely terrifying, because he really is. When he can load off 2 feet and leap, I don't know if I've seen anybody that can move like him, has the body control like you noted as a finisher. He's not just a power guy too. Like he has some nimbleness. We saw some quickness getting to the rim, and he had
like a Euro step last night in transition. It was ridiculous.
I mean, we talk about outliers a lot too, and I think in this case, like, he's a 99th percentile athlete in the NBA. The only thing holding him back, in my opinion, is the lateral quickness defensively. We'll see more of that as the season progresses, but as a run and jump athlete, he's easily a 99th percentile athlete. But I think that overall, functionally, a lot of it applies to the floor, and I think that is where he needs to get more respect. Is it's not just this and one mixtape dunker guy. Like, he has legitimate skill level, and he can unleash a lot of his athleticism because of that. Like, dynamic first step too.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. This guy is the absolute freak of all freaks athletically. Like, he is going to enter the NBA as the best athlete in the NBA, I think. Like, who do we think can top him right now?
Off the top of my head, I really can't think of anybody. Like, he's that. I mean, prime LeBron, I would take prime LeBron, but LeBron's not peak LeBron now. And I think that Zion just has those fresh legs. It's tough. I mean, again, we just don't see the combination of speed, power, agility. Just nobody else has that at his size.
Yeah, like, it's just totally unbelievable. And again, like, it's like you said, it's not just the explosiveness. It's the body control. It's the nimble nature in which he can actually achieve what he wants to achieve on the basketball floor. And then the other part of this too that neither of us have mentioned yet is he plays fucking hard, man.
Yep.
Like, that dude goes hard every single second he's out on the floor, to the point where he's leaping so high in like over guys, and like, you know, having guys kind of tunnel him, not even tunnel him, because he's literally jumping over them. Like, you're worried about how he's going to land half the time, and you're worried about injury. Like, that is where so many of my concerns with him come up as a long-term prospect. Like, his game, like, I think he's a lot more skilled than what he gets credit for. You know, like I said, he can handle the ball. He can pass it. We saw last night, his jump shot has improved. It's still a long release, and I'm not convinced that it's going to translate super well to the NBA line right now. We'll see how it goes throughout the course of the season. We'll see how consistent it is. But he's improved there unquestionably since the last time I saw him in March or April or May or whenever the hell that was. So, like, the fact that he is continually getting better, the fact that he just turned 18 years old, which is the craziest fucking thing about this. Like, he is one of the youngest players in his class. There's a lot of reason to think that he is an incredibly high upside player. I just am so worried about the potential for injury. I'm worried about the wear and tear long term on his body as he carries that much weight. And I'm worried about the way that his frame matures as he gets older. If he's like this at 18, where he's 285 pounds, I just don't know how that body matures as you just get older and naturally heavier.
Yeah, I think he's going to have to cut some weight for sure. It's just a lot of force to put on his knees, carrying that kind of frame with the power he plays with and the force he plays with. I think that might wear down over time, but I do think he can lose weight. And I think that in an NBA strength and conditioning program, they're probably going to feature that and get him down to like 250, 260, around that range. I think that's more of his playing level as opposed to 285 or whatever. I think that's a little bit too much. I agree with you. I think his mentality is what I like. He seems to play hard.
He gets winded out there.
Yes, that was kind of what I was going to say just now. It's like his off-ball defense last night, like, he wasn't consistently engaged. It wasn't like he was playing hard at all points, but it was also like, it kind of felt like his conditioning level wasn't to the level that you think it would be, and that's fine because it's the first game in August, so it's to be expected. I want to see him more off the ball, how engaged he is. We saw the highlight kind of blocks. He can definitely protect the rim from the weak side. I mean, he can get to balls, even though he doesn't have the best reach. He can get to balls that very few guys on the planet can get to with his 2-foot explosion. So I like some of the rotation stuff he showed. He was, I think, hunting steals on blocks a little bit last night, so I want to see how he translates into a more competitive setting when they play, you know, ACC basketball and it's a high matchup with North Carolina. How gauges he off the ball? But I do like his mentality. I do like his mindset. That kind of manifests on the floor. Like, he's an attacker offensively too. Like, he's on that end, he's consistently engaged. So there's a lot to like with him. But I do agree with your injury points and his weight issue. Yeah,
look, like, again, I think he's incredible. These are the kind of nitpicks that you make when you're talking about a guy that is number 4, number 5 on a draft board. You know what I mean? Like, it's not a situation where I don't like Zion Williamson. I think he's fucking incredible at basketball. He is, like we said, just the most elite athlete I think I've ever seen perform at this level in my life. It's just you gotta consider these factors whenever you're expending what is now at like the number 4 overall pick, $20 million on a guy, and then the opportunity cost of taking another guy that ends up staying healthy and being better and being in better shape and, being able to control his weight a little bit better.
The last thing I'll say is on the shooting element. I mean, I'm glad we kind of put that secondarily in this conversation because I think that's where it deserves to be. There was a lot of reaction last night, like, oh, if he can shoot that well. I didn't notice a ton of differences. I just did a write-up on him as well for the Step In, watched a lot of tape. I didn't see a ton of difference. He was experimenting with a set shot later in his AAU career. He was even doing that last summer where he was angling his feet and trying to align his elbow better, but he still wasn't getting that elbow alignment. That's one area to watch. But for the most part, maybe he got a little bit more knee bend last night, but I just thought he made shots. We'll see how consistent that is. I'm not totally sold on it. His release just looks really funky kind of because he brings the ball up on his right side. His shot line is on his right, and he kind of moves it over to his left and kind of tries to snap it, with alignment on his left side. So when he does that, just by the nature of that motion, it flares his elbow out. So we'll kind of see how much he can get that in and how consistent he is. I'd like to see him again, a little bit better rhythm, getting into his shots, maybe getting on the balls of his feet a little bit more. So that's something to watch. I still don't really buy it. He doesn't have a pull-up game from 3. He didn't attempt a pull-up shot last night, but he did show that ability in AAU as far as in the mid-range. That's when you see more of his high elevation shot, when he can really just leap over the top of guys and finish in the mid-range area. So that's something to look for as far as a shot creator. I think he has that Ben Simmons kind of emergency jumper, and he's even more comfortable than Simmons is in that situation. So it's not like this guy can't shoot it all off the dribble, but if he can push that back to 3 eventually, I think if he does that, I think he has the highest upside in this class. I think he's the best athlete. I think the skill level is there outside of shooting that you can make that argument pretty easily.
Yeah. So a couple thoughts there, actually. So I think that the shot does look better. You mentioned the alignment. That's one thing that I actually really liked. I thought that he has kind of changed his release point now to where it is more consistently in alignment with his left side. That should lead to a more consistent release point, more consistent rotation on the ball. But you're right, he does still bring it up from the right side, which is kind of a strange deal. I just hope that he can continue to repeat and continue to get the kind of rotation on the ball that he needs to in order for that to be effective. In terms of a pull-up game, I don't have much faith in him being like a pull-up creator. Like just in terms of being like a half-court guy that, can pump fake, get a guy in the air, run toward the basket, stop whenever a help defender comes over, pull up from 15 feet and shoot. Like that's kind of the difference between being a super high level, elite level NBA player and being a like incredible, unbelievable role player. I think that's more where I see him right now. I think I see him more as like a starting center who lets you unlock lineups athletically and you throw lobs to. Maybe he stretches the floor a little bit, but probably not. You run the floor with like crazy. He's a more scheme dependent than what I think a star is normally going to be, I guess.
I think that's fair. I'm buying the mid-range pull-up a little bit more than you are. It sounds like I'm selling the three-point pull-up pretty heavily at this juncture. I'm not sure if I ever see that getting there. That's the area that, if he had that, I think you could kind of profile him more into like a primary creator role.
Well, here's another thing about this too. I don't know that any defender will ever respect his three-point shot more than they will try and dissuade him from driving. Like, I think generally teams are going to be a lot more comfortable with him shooting out there. Just because they don't want him to get ahead of steam and attack the basket like that.
Of course, and that's going to be kind of the game that defenders play with him. Maybe put a bigger defender like an Al Horford on him, like we see with Simmons, play a couple feet off and try to wall him off. I do think I kind of believe in the mid-range shot. Not saying it's going to be efficient enough to ever be like a go-to weapon, but I think as like a last resort, he has that in his game. And he can kind of maybe progress there a little bit. For me, like his special traits are that he's a mismatch creator. He's versatile. And that's something that he's not probably going to be able to show at Duke because he's not going to be utilized that way. But you can use this guy as the screener, as a roll man. You can use him in so many different ways as far as optimizing him. You can't switch pick and roll with a guard on him because he'll just post the guard and bully him. He can pass out of the post. There's just a lot more versatility to this game that I think is really going to hammer home at the NBA level if he's utilized correctly. And I think that's where we kind of maybe differ a little bit as far as utilization. I get what you're saying. He's kind of the toughest fit of all of the top-level guys. I think that's definitely fair to say. But if you do optimize him, I feel like, again, you could get that untapped upside. I think the same thing with, like, Ben Simmons, who's an incredible prospect. But we saw against Boston, like, he can't be the full-time initiator because they can take that shit away. And then you got to utilize him and really optimize his versatility as, like, the screener and all that stuff as a big posting, passing out of the post. So I think that Zion offers not maybe the same exact skill set as Simmons, but something along those lines of just being a mismatch creator where you can really utilize him in a multitude of ways. Yeah,
and that guy is going to, again, just be unbelievably valuable in the NBA. Just incredibly valuable, I think. So, we're on the same page. We both have Zion as a top 5 prospect in this class. He's ridiculous. He's going to be unbelievable in college, and he's going to be super fun to watch. Just given the way that Zion's body looks, I would assume he's been eating a lot of RX bars, because RX bars are whole food protein bars. That means that their bars are made with 100% whole ingredients. They want to be transparent and upfront with their customers, which is why they label the core ingredients, which are egg whites, dates, and nuts, on the front of the package, and the ingredients that make up the texture and taste on the back. Beyond being a go-to snack that checks off a number of nutritional boxes, RX bars actually taste delicious. They found that creating a bar made from real whole food ingredients actually tastes better than anything else out there. They don't need fillers, additives, chemicals, or anything. They just need the natural ingredients that they find, coming out of the ground or coming from roosters whenever they lay eggs, or do chickens lay eggs? I don't really know. Having said that, RX Bar's core ingredients do all of the talking. It really is like eating 3 egg whites, 2 dates, and 6 almonds. There is no BS there. It turns out that real whole food ingredients actually taste better than the other substitutes. You can actually taste the chocolate, the real fruit, the spices. Whether you like sweet or savory, chocolate or fruit flavors, there's an RX bar for you. They are gluten-free, soy-free, dairy-free, no added sugar, no artificial colors, no artificial flavors, preservatives, or fillers. They are great for a number of occasions, be it breakfast on the go, snack at the office, or to throw in your bag for a plane ride. I am a big fan of RX bars. I'm going to be taking a long plane ride to Australia next Friday. I am going to be packing multiple RX bars on that trip to make sure that I stay nice and healthy during this 16-hour plane ride that I have. So for you guys, the listeners of the show, I have to tell you, I have an offer for 25% off your first order and free shipping. Visit rxbar.com/gametheory. That's GAMETHEORY, or enter that promo code GameTheory at checkout. Again, that's rxbar.com/gametheory. Can't emphasize enough, we are big RX Bar fans here at the Game Theory Podcast. Cole, let's move in to this project that we have been continuing on over the course of the last 3 weeks. We're going to start with Golden State. That's a pretty easy ask, right? Like, Golden State isn't a wild one to talk about.
Yeah, Golden State's pretty straightforward, I think. Once we get to the Lakers in the next podcast with Phoenix and Sacramento, it gets a little dicier. But with the Warriors, I think it's pretty straightforward here.
Yeah, so who is the guy you want to talk about first? Probably Jordan Bell, right?
That's correct.
So Jordan Bell, to me, is probably the best guy on this list. Jacob Evans probably has a higher ceiling to me than Jordan Bell, just until Jordan Bell learns to do something offensively other than make the short roll pass. But Jordan Bell is an unbelievable asset for this Warriors team because he's cheap right now and he fits exactly what they want to do within their defensive scheme.
Yeah, I have him and Jacob Evans in the same tier. I think both of these guys are definitely role player types, and I just love Jordan Bell's fit on this team specifically. That is what gives him a higher upside, is because he doesn't have to be any kind of creator for himself. He's basically a lob threat, an energy big, and a passer. And that's the way that the Warriors utilize their role players. Even Draymond Green, Andre Iguodala, those guys are decision makers. They catch the ball, they wait for one of the Warriors' 3 shooters to come off the screen, they make reads, and they optimize the Warriors' shot quality. And I think that Jordan Bell profiles well in that. And he's already shown that his rookie year, the ability to make reads and kind of play disciplined basketball. We've seen kind of his two-man actions a little bit with Steph Curry, like through the legs passes and stuff like that. I think that he has a high IQ, both offensively and defensively. And defensively is where he really makes, that's his calling card as far as his versatility. Not quite good enough as a switch defender to switch on to like James Harden types. We saw that in the playoffs. He's not that caliber of player, but he's a really high-level team defender. He knows how to play in a team construct, and against most lineups, especially in the regular season, he's more of a situational big, but in certain matchups, again, like against the Rockets when teams play a little smaller, I think he can have a lot of value as like a lower-end starter type.
Yeah, no question. For the Warriors, I think he is a starter. Like, he can be a starter next year on this team. He probably won't be in the playoffs because DeMarcus Cousins exists, but I would imagine that he's probably their starter going into the year, right?
I would think so. They tend
it's
to
either him or
a
Kevon.
Yeah, I think Kevon, they seem to have a little bit more trust in his established ability there, so maybe they keep that dynamic. I think it's going to depend a little bit on the opponent, even though Kevon, in theory, presents a lot of the similar strengths defensively as Jordan does. He's not as good of a passer offensively, so it's going to be kind of interesting to see how they play that out. Kevon's a little bit bigger, so I think it's going to depend on the matchup. The Warriors are kind of new age and modern in that way. Like, they'll play their personnel in their non-star positions. They'll kind of adjust to the competition, which I really like.
Yeah, no, I think that's definitely right. Yeah, I think Jordan Bell is like. What do we think the next step for Jordan Bell is? Like, is it becoming more efficient around the basket? Like, do we think he has the frame with which he can become more efficient around the basket? Or do we think it's add the 3-point shot?
Well, I mean, if he adds a 3-point shot, that's a whole different ballgame. I mean, we saw that pull-up three he had, I think, in Sacramento or Utah Summer League, whatever it was.
Well,
I don't expect that.
He's been working on the three. Like, he wants to shoot the three. Like, at Summer League, he took quite a few of them, it felt like.
Yeah, I mean, if he gets that, then we're talking about a starting caliber player on that team, in my opinion. But for me, again, I think that's probably the case. Like, he's already a good finisher on the basket, but a lot of them, of course, are advantage opportunities. They're in short rolls where he has the advantage as a cutter. He's never going to be a post guy as a scorer. That's not the way the Warriors are going to run their offense. So he'll pass out of the post, and I think he's already pretty proficient at that. So if you're looking at how he can take the next step, I very much agree with you. If he can add that 3-point shot, which I'm pretty skeptical of it ever becoming like a thing. Like, he might be kind of a fake shooter who can make it sometimes, but if it gets consistent, that just gives him a whole different level of ceiling trajectory.
If he's a 33%, let's say 36% 3-point shooter when he's wide open, that is just a totally different ball game, I think.
Oh my God, yes.
Yeah, like if it's not even like being a consistent 35, 36% shooter. If he can just make them at a 36% clip when he's open and when he has the shot, totally different ball game for him. He is a definite starter in that scenario. I would still probably bet on him being a starting NBA player at some point, though. Maybe as soon as next year, it'll either be him or Kevon Looney. I know that we have Jacob Evans next, but I think it's just natural to talk about Kevon Looney in this kind of spot, right? Kevon Looney was an unrestricted free agent. I was surprised that his market didn't develop more. And he goes back to the Warriors on what is near a minimum or a minimum. Which one is it?
I think it was the minimum. If last I recall, I don't have it in front of me, but it was definitely near regardless. So he definitely didn't get the value that maybe some expected with his play in the playoffs. Maybe you thought a team was going to pay him, even though the market was already saturated and there wasn't a lot of spenders, and know how valuable fives are in the modern NBA. Yes, it was a minimum contract. So that good deal for the Warriors. I think they got value on him. Remember, they declined his option, and they got more value on this. They saved luxury tax dollars signing him to a lesser amount. So good for them.
Yeah, no, I think that's critical that they got that, got him to stay even, because I think he's now a valuable player. I got to see him, and this will lead into another story entirely. Like, I got to see him over the last 3 days at SAC up at UCLA, where Rico Hines runs the run that players out in Los Angeles in the NBA do, and he's looked pretty good. He looks to be in better shape. He looks a lot bigger than what he has over the course of certainly his first 2 years in the league. I do think he looked a little bit bigger last season physically and in terms of strength, but he doesn't have that like indented chest anymore. Like, he is physically pretty big.
Yeah, he's bigger than Jordan Bell, so I think he kind of gives you... I think this is kind of a similar analysis, so not the exact same player, but how Looney takes the next step is the shooting still. That's going to be the element for him. He shot, he's 25% from three in his career. If he makes an open shot, and that's something else we should have said for Bell, is like, these guys are going to be open, right? You can't guard everybody on the Warriors, and you're leaving these guys open for sure. So if he can develop that 3-point shot at all, like a wide open catch and shoot, I think that's the next step for him.
Yeah, and like, even at UCLA, like, he's not shooting. He is diving to the basket, doing the small things, which is fine, I think. Like, even if he's doing that among a group of NBA players, like, totally cool to me. By the way, Kevin Durant was up there yesterday at UCLA. The most ridiculous pickup player. Like, this should come as no surprise, right? But, like, even playing against other NBA players in pickup, it is a sight to behold. Like, his team never lost. Never. Like, it didn't even feel like they were ever close to losing. Like, he was playing with Bobby Brown, Denzel Valentine, like Thomas Bryant, like guys who are on the end of NBA rosters, like borderline NBA players. In his team playing against, like there was a team that had Julius Randle, Dante Exum, who else? Bradley Beal was on that team, like loaded rosters. And Kevin Durant's team, it never felt like they were close to losing.
I can only imagine. I've never seen him up close in that kind of setting, but I can't imagine how he would be guardable with his pull-up and ability to get to anywhere he wants on the floor anytime he wants to. I just think he's the most, probably one of the most deadly kind of pull or I don't know, throw together game player. Like when it's like more of a free flowing open game, when it's skill based and it's not really that organized. I think he would just get the ball and you can't stop him.
That's basically what it was. And like the thing that you have to kind of be near him to notice is just the ridiculous balance that he has. He can like kind of take a right to left crossover, end up on his left foot and shoot a perfectly balanced shot. Like it's not a leaning shot. It's not it's not out of whack. It's not off kilter. It is a perfectly balanced shot. And it goes in 90% of the time because he's Kevin Durant and it's ridiculous. It really is something to behold. Like he's not the most explosive athlete in the world, but he is like 7 foot with a 7'7" wingspan or whatever. So like he's just so big and covers so much ground and covers so much space that it's the most bananas thing like you will see in person is Kevin Durant playing pickup against other NBA players.
I have seen him in person as far as he was at Hoop Summit a couple times. He shows up. He doesn't play, of course, but you see how tall he is. I've stood right next to him basically, and he's definitely like 7 foot. Like that dude, it's historically unprecedented to have a guy with his skill level, his shot functionality, who's 7 foot with that long of a wingspan. He really is. You cannot take him away, and that's. I mean, we talked about this in the past. He's getting a lot of shit in the playoffs as far as he's going one-on-one too much, and people love to hate on Durant because he has become really unlikable. But as far as his skill level and his size, again, I'm not sure if we've ever seen anything quite like it.
No, I don't even care about the unlikable thing either. Like, to me, that's just such bullshit. Like, do whatever you want to do, Kevin. Be yourself. I am all for athletes being themselves. And if he wants to be the way that he is, and just kind of naturally... I don't want to say he's a shit stirrer, but he kind of is a shit stirrer a little bit. Like if he wants to naturally do that, do your thing. I don't care. I mean, that's great. Do it.
I mean, you don't have to be likable all the time. And I think he maybe cares too much. I don't know. Like I don't care about that stuff. I just miss that all.
But if you want to care too much, care too much. I don't care. Like if that's how you are, be you, man. I'm all for it.
This is a very open podcast to other people's ideas.
I am honestly, I'm very open when it comes to Kevin Durant being Kevin Durant. And just, I want Kevin Durant to be happy. I just want him to enjoy his life. And if he enjoys his life by going on Twitter and seeing the cesspool that is his mentions daily, do your thing, Kevin. I'm all for it, man.
There you go.
Jacob Evans is next on this list. And we can probably talk about him in conjunction with Patrick McCaw, right? Because those two guys, in all likelihood, assuming that Patrick McCaw takes his qualifying offer, probably going to be battling for minutes next year.
Yep. And same conceptual. I mean, different players. Patrick McCaw's quicker on the ball, a little bit more. He's better at the point of attack, but he doesn't have quite the frame of Jacob Evans, even though Jacob isn't necessarily big himself. But conceptually, they're both going to have to make open catch and shoot threes. That is the mandatory requirement for a lot of the Warriors role players who aren't Iguodala and Draymond Green. You're getting your value via shooting equity off the catch. But yeah, Jacob Evans kind of fits what the Warriors like in a player. He's cerebral. He has that kind of point guard mind. He doesn't have the skill set or the athleticism to unleash that, but he thinks that way on the floor, makes the extra passes, really knows how to play. Great team defender. But the shot, man, did not look good in Summer League. I watched a lot of him, as you did, at Cincinnati. I thought his mechanics were changed. He's shooting more of an out, not up shot. A lot of his releases were flat. Watched him pretty close in person. Yeah. Also worth noting that he's just not that physically imposing, man. He looks a little bit smaller. He's more like a popular comparison was Courtney Lee. I think that's how he looks as far as build. He's not a big, imposing kind of perimeter defender. He's more in like the 6'5", doesn't have crazy tools. He's just got really high intellect.
Yeah, and he's not super quick either. He's pretty slow, actually. Like him and Patrick McCaw are very different players in just about every single way. Like McCaw is more of a guy who gets by on that quickness, can really, really handle the ball, can get into the lane, has these nice extension finishes, more wiry, despite the fact that they're within probably an inch of height. You know, Jacob Evans is a little bit more stout, little bit more strong, has more of a strong torso, I would say, than what Patrick McCaw does. they're going to be utilized in different matchups, I would imagine. And a lot of it, though, is going to be dependent on Jacob figuring out whatever the fuck happened to his jump shot, because he was like a 40% three-point shooter over the last 2 years at Cincinnati, and he changed it, and I'm not entirely sure what happened there. I do know he was battling, if I remember correctly, it was like a broken finger or something. Like that could have something to do with it, but it seemed like a more drastic shot mechanic change than anything.
Yeah, I really couldn't put my finger on it. I watched it back, and again, I just think he's not getting the same arm angle on his release. This is coming out more flat. So maybe that's the case. Maybe we'll see him adjust that. But he was just not the same caliber of shooter that we saw. He was, I think, in summer league play, he was 3 of 18 on jump shots in the half court. You could really tell, even in the tape in wherever they played, Sacramento or Utah, before they went to Las Vegas, it just didn't look the same. So that is his key input. Like, he's a good passer, he'll make good decisions, but he's going to have to make a spot 3. I think if he does that, he'll be a rotation player for them, just because in that scheme, it's going to optimize his strengths and minimize his weaknesses, which are mostly in the creation category. Like, he doesn't have a good first step. He's not a slasher. He's got really raw instincts as a general scorer, but a guy who just can accept a role. He will play within the confines of himself. And I think that's what the Warriors look for, is guys who can do that in a secondary fashion, because then they unearth all the opportunities for their star players.
Yep, no question there. Do we have anything else we want to talk about with those two?
McCaw, I think a lot of this is shooting confidence. Like, he doesn't have the best mechanics, and he's working on those in the offseason, which is good for him, but he's never been like a very aggressive shooter. That's something that it's just never really manifested itself as far as his confidence level. I think with the Warriors, he passes up a lot of shots, drives to the rim where he's not great there. You just want to see him make more threes. So conceptually, they offer similar as far as how they think the game. I think McCaw's a pretty smart player. He's a pretty good passer. He definitely looks for the Warrior shooters a lot. But it's going to come down to the shot, man. Like, all these guys, if they don't shoot, they're probably not rotation players. If they do, I like traits of both of these guys. Yeah,
no, I agree. I think that they're both pretty interesting, and I think that they're both NBA players. And to get NBA players where the Warriors took those two guys, I think is a great sign for Golden State's front office. Damian Jones, on the other hand, I'm not convinced he's an NBA player. I never really have been. Definitely more of just an athlete as opposed to a actual basketball player. Always a bit underwhelming at Vanderbilt. Always expected more out of him. Not overly physical, but again, like, this dude is just the elite of the elite in terms of athleticism at 7 feet tall.
He was an upside play, and that's kind of falls in contrast to a lot of the guys the Warriors have drafted that late. They take more of maybe the established guys who they think can fill a role more easily and can kind of play right away. Jones is more of he has the athletic pedigree. He has a little bit of skill, not much. He's more of a finishing type as far as a play finisher, but doesn't have the cerebralness that a lot of these other guys have. That's the thing that always set me off with him at Vanderbilt, is he was never really an aware defender protecting the rim. Like, he was always, like, for me, he was mostly in the wrong position. He didn't really have a great sense of defense. Like, his flash plays were great because he's athletic, but as far as knowing how to play the game, I think that's what holds him back.
Well, do you know what the wild thing about that is, though?
Go ahead.
He's super, super fucking smart. Like, really? As a human being, he's so, like very, very smart.
Interesting. Yeah, I did not know that. Well, that hasn't manifested on the floor.
I agree with you. It doesn't manifest itself on the floor, but like, it's just interesting that it doesn't always translate in that way.
Exactly right. I think that's a good takeaway point, as far as being smart in real life doesn't always equate to having great basketball instincts and being able to make reads in the situation and stuff. It's worth noting that I thought he had a couple really nice passes in summer league. Most of them weren't like crazy on the move passes, but he did have a couple nice bounce pass reads. So that's something to monitor. I think that's a way he can add value, because he can catch the ball at the top of the key. You're not going to have him dribble, but with Warriors scheme, again, a lot of those shooters are running off motion. So if he can hit those guys in a backdoor cut or a drill hand-up situation, because you have to stick with the Warrior shooter, so he can be a screener in that sense. I just don't know what his overall value is to this team, because he's going to have to bring it defensively. I just don't know what he does on the floor outside of being an athlete that a guy like Jordan Bell can't bring to the table, or Kevon Looney. Yeah, no, I generally think that I agree with that.
Yeah, I mean, like, it's funny. We talk about, like, this guy is a smart basketball player. This guy is a dumb basketball player. Oftentimes, I feel like it doesn't actually equate to intelligence. It equates to reaction time and to just how quickly you can, kind of see what's happening out there on the floor and then react to it. So it's, I think it's kind of tough tough to put it all together. I mean, it's all piece. Like, certainly you have to be smart enough to be able to know your plays and know what your reads are and know everything. But it's, you know, like we talk about basketball IQ and we talk about that. Like, often that's why I use the word feel more now. Like, I feel like it is more of a feel for the game and like feel for reaction time than it is with actual intelligence.
100%. And I think that you can kind of put them under the same umbrella, but it's necessary to separate it out that way and look at specific intellect on the floor as opposed to just natural instincts reacting to plays. And that's hard to establish. That's one of the things that I don't know if you ever really get for interior defenders, for bigs, for example. Do you ever really develop that reaction time? It's tough to say. Like, at least Jones has the athleticism to compensate a little bit, but I'm not sure it's going to be enough to keep him in the league, even though I do think, in theory, he can kind of fill that McGee role as like a rim roller type, but I don't think he has the same level of physical presence as McGee. McGee's just so big, but that's kind of conceptually what I think they're getting at with this kind of player.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree there. Kendrick Nunn also got signed by the Warriors. You told me that. I don't see him on the roster, but I believe it. I don't really want to have thoughts on Kendrick Nunn just because I think it's kind of gross that the Warriors signed him, but do you have thoughts?
Not a lot. He has a summer contract, so it's not guaranteed. I'm not sure if he's going to make the roster or not, so that's something to look for. But for me, I didn't watch a ton of him in college just because of the off-the-field concerns. I just didn't know if he'd actually get a shot in the NBA. But for me, someone who can score, he can shoot the ball off motion. We saw that in Summer League. I just don't know if he's going to be a high IQ enough player for the Warriors system. But he definitely has one NBA skill, in my opinion. I just don't know if it's ever going to be enough to really get him minutes or even make the roster. Yeah,
I mean, so he ends up leaving, for people who know, like, he ends up leaving Illinois because he had like a accusation of domestic violence attached to his name. He had to, like, if I remember correctly, he avoided a conviction by completing 100 hours of community service, completing a 26 partner abuse prevention program, and wrote a letter of apology to the victim while under 18 months of court supervision. My actions I can't blame anyone for, he said. Now I would have just walked away from it. It's hard because it's he said, she said. When there's a female involved, they automatically listen to what she says. And then finally, I've grown a lot. I'm wiser. I've moved on from it. Doesn't really feel like he's grown a lot based off of those previous comments. So I'm not necessarily a big fan of giving someone the NBA chance that seems to have not made the sort of growth that we should be striving for in these circumstances.
Yeah, I have nothing to add outside of that. I think that's well said.
Let's move on and talk about the Clippers. The Clippers obviously have 2 new draft picks. That is fantastic. They have Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and Jerome Robinson. We were both much higher on Shai Gilgeous-Alexander than we were on Jerome Robinson, correct?
That is very correct.
Were you wildly high on Shai pre-draft? I feel like you weren't, if I remember correctly.
No, I was definitely not wildly high. I had him, I think, 15th on my board, so I liked him, but I didn't have him in the top 10. I didn't see the upside, but I did like him a lot as a player. Yeah,
like I had him in the top 10, had him in the same tier as I had Trae Young and Colin Sexton. I'm a big fan of Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. I thought this was a tremendous pick by the Clippers. I like him for many of the reasons that you weren't necessarily super high on him. I love the idea of him being versatile. I love the idea of him being this guy who can play the 1 and the 2, who can maybe eventually move down and guard threes, can be a primary initiator, can probably be a secondary off-ball creator. He needs to shoot a little bit more for that to happen, but I think the jump shot is going to come along. I generally am just a big fan of his game, and I think that there is very real, like, mid-level starting point guard upside here. And mid-level starting point guards in the NBA, given how valuable that is, top 75 players, top 60 players in the NBA.
Yeah, I think that's definitely fair. I'm not as high on his overall upside. A lot of people were... That's what sold them on him, is like he's the number 1 point guard in the class because he could be like maybe a top 10, top 7 point guard. I don't see that. I don't see the dynamic ability as a pull-up shooter. I still didn't see that in Summer League. He had one really awesome step-back three, I think, from the wing in maybe his third game. I was watching in Cox. That was pretty impressive. But overall, that's the swing scale for me, is can he shoot shots off the dribble from deep? I think he can do it from mid-range. He sped up his release a little bit in Summer League. I was buying a little bit more. We talked about this on the Summer League podcast. The first game he played, I thought his balance was horrible on pull-ups. I think he was like 1 of 5. But as the Summer League progressed, he made improvements there. He can shoot over the top of guys, but I'm not really a fan of his like lower body mechanics from deep. I just don't see enough knee bend, enough power in his shot overall. He doesn't go off the balls of his feet. It's more like a flat-footed shot. I just don't know how well that's going to translate to NBA threes above the break as like a primary ball handler. But I love, like for me, I loved his median outcome. I think he's going to be a solid player. Like I would be surprised if that dude isn't like a 10-year rotation player at the very least, just because he feels the game really well. He can dribble, pass, and shoot in theory if he can shoot off the catch, which I'm a little bit higher on as opposed to who's off the dribble shooting. So it's easy to see him profiling in a two-way role who can play make some. And I think in the modern game, that's really valuable.
Yeah, no, I have no real other thoughts there. I do like the defensive value that I think he's going to be able to bring. You look at what he was able to do. I think he actually did a pretty good job chasing guys over the top on screens this year. He does a really good job of contesting shots and using his length to his advantage against point guards. The fact that he's quick enough to guard point guards at 6'6" with a 7-foot wingspan and the standing reach of some 4s in the NBA right now, that I think creates a very real, like we talk about offensive mismatches often. To me, that creates a marginal advantage mismatch situation defensively whenever you can do that kind of stuff. It was like with the example I always go back to is Alonzo G with the Cavs like many years ago. The fact that he was 6'5" and was like a 3 but could slide down the lineup and guard 1s. That was a marginal advantage for the Cavs because they were able to use more versatile defensive lineups. So I'm a big fan of what I see from him defensively, despite the lack of girth.
Yeah, I think the strength reflects on both ends. If he was RJ Barrett, as far as not just athleticism, but build, I would have been higher on him as far as we see that offensively with his ability to step around guys. He's got good footwork, that long stride, the horizontal length extension finishes. But when you get into him and you really contact his body, I think his body control is okay, but he really lessens in that scenario just because he's not very strong. He's wiry. He's 180 pounds or 182 pounds, whatever they had him listed as a 6'6" guy. So you can kind of tell the narrower build. But yeah, defensively, I'm not as high maybe on him as you. I see him as being like a net positive, but I don't see necessarily impactful, but that's still valuable, right? That's a two-way player. So that's what I like about him. I don't think he's necessarily like the quickest guy. Like guarding Colin Sexton, in college, Sexton's obviously, for college standards, very athletic. And I thought Colin Sexton kind of blew right by him multiple times. I don't think he has the best lateral agility, but I love him as a team defender. I think that's where you noted the reach. He uses his length really well in passing lanes. He can protect the rim maybe a little bit from the weak side just with his length. And I think in the modern game that relies on like a holistic team unit defensive construct where you have to have your wing players do that stuff, I think he's going to be good there. So this is just a long-winded way of saying I'm a fan of him overall. I think he's going to be an NBA rotation player at the very least. I can see like maybe low to median end starting outcome. I just don't really see the high ceiling with him, but maybe you can prove me wrong. Like he's the guy I'm most worried about being wrong about just because he's such a great kid too. I think he's going to improve. I'm definitely rooting for him though. This is a really awesome, from everything you hear about him, he's definitely someone you want to bet on.
Yeah, he's very interesting because, like in many ways, he is very shy as well. So, like, he needs to maybe, get that, motherfucker, mentality going. But he plays hard. Like, it's not a situation where he is not confident in himself. He just is shy. And, he sometimes that can be a disadvantage whenever you're going against dudes that are wild every single time. So, yeah, we'll see what happens with him. I'm at least intrigued by his potential.
100%.
Jerome Robinson, I had as a late first round value. I thought he was totally reasonable once you got to. I would have understood it if the Bucks took him, much in the same way that I would have understood it if the Bucks took Dante DiVincenzo like they did. I had Dante right around the same range as I had Jerome Robinson. He is exactly what I think the Bucks need. They needed a secondary scorer. They went out and got one. In the case of Jerome Robinson at number 13, I think it's a reach. That kid is such a nice kid. He is awesome. He's a great dude. He thinks the game on a super, super high level. I really have enjoyed. I think I've had 2 or 3 conversations with him. I've really, really enjoyed both of the conversations I've had. He is, to me, just a little bit of a reach.
Yeah, and honestly, if it was any other executive other than Jerry West, I would be a lot more confident in what I saw. But I think Jerry West just kind of deserves a little bit of the benefit of the doubt here, which has given me some cause for concern. But I've just never really been that impressed with him. His archetype is just really, really hard to cut it when you're like a secondary scorer type. I mean, I believe in the shooting for sure. He can shoot off the dribble. I think he can play make secondarily. He can run a pick and roll as far as making reads out of there at a relatively good level. Not a primary initiator type, but a secondary guy. It's just how damn good you have to be offensively to compensate for the lack of defense. He's like kind of a CJ McCollum type archetype, but it's just impossible to be as good as CJ. You know what I mean? Like, it very rarely happens. Like CJ, Devin Booker, those guys are examples of what you have to be to really be a plus player. If you are that kind of player, that you're taking something off the table as a passer, especially as a defender and a secondary guy. So it's a tough sell. I think his fit with Shai is kind of interesting. That's going to help because Shai is versatile. He can defend different guys and he can initiate an offense. So I get that dynamic. I think they work well conceptually together, but I do agree with you that it was a reach for me. It was like a flat out reach. I didn't have him as a first round prospect. I had him, second round is fine. You take dice rolls on that guy. You just hope he develops enough in his ancillary areas, but it's just, for me, how good is he going to have to be offensively to live up to that?
Yeah, I think he's going to have to be unbelievable. He's going to have to be like a 60-plus true shooting percentage guy probably, right? And doing it on pretty big volume, like 16 points a game, right?
Yeah, and that's really tough. I mean, that's tough in the NBA. If you're going to project him as a starter, that is, maybe as a reserve, if he's like a reserve shooter / secondary ball creator, or maybe he can play some backup point guard essentially for you. I get that, but as a starting caliber player on a good team, man, he's going to have to be good, because we even see the limitations of having a smaller backcourt. Of course, this doesn't apply to Shai, but just having a two guard that kind of takes something off the table defensively to the level he's at really just puts that much more emphasis on your offensive acumen.
Yeah, I think he is like a very real non-distributor at the point guard position. Like, he's a guy that is going to really struggle to get everyone else involved. He's not like he's more of a CJ distributor. Like, you're basically betting on him being CJ McCollum, taking him at number 13.
Exactly right. And like, for me, I think maybe I'm putting too much emphasis. I don't see him as like a lead ball handler, but putting too much emphasis on some of the reads he did make, which for a secondary guy in college was kind of intriguing, but I was never really enamored with his decision making overall. So I agree with you. I think that you profile him as a secondary scorer type, and that's just really hard to be a good player like of that ilk. Yeah,
no question. Who's next? Who do we want to go to? Ty Wallace, Sindarius, Thornwell? It has to be one of those two probably, right?
Yeah, I have them both in the same tier. So, I mean, we can start with Thornwell. I'm still, like, cautiously optimistic on him. I love his defense. I love how his best asset overall, outside of his whole mirroring defensively and just knowing where to be, is just the fuck you that he plays with on the floor. Like, he's an aggressive player. He takes guys to the rim. Like, defensively, he's physical. He embraces contact. I like his mental approach to the game. It's just another guy where it really comes down to the jump shot. If he can shoot the ball off the catch, I think he's a rotation player. I think he's going to survive defensively. He has the strength. He has the top-notch, maybe not D'Anthony Melton type instincts, but pretty damn close to that, I think, as a team defender. Mm-hmm. So I'm a fan of his overall. It comes down to the jump shot. It makes or breaks him. If he's a 35, 36% three-point shooter, I think he's a rotation player in the NBA. But if he's a 29 to 30 guy on high volume, he probably isn't a rotation player.
Yeah, shot 37.7 last year from three on 61 attempts. He really did not seem confident, I didn't think. He has that, like, over the course of his career at South Carolina, he really developed his jump shot and changed it multiple times. What he settled on his last year, when he shot 39.2% on pretty reasonable volume, was kind of a set shot that really didn't have much utility off the dribble, which is fine. Like, the Clippers don't need him to be able to make shots off the dribble. They just need him to be able to knock down open corner threes and maybe an occasional above the break three. It'd at least open up their offense if he can knock down an above the break three. But yeah, he's a good defender, and he is tough. He's physical. He embraces contact. He wants to play with that energy. And I think he's a rotation player. I don't know that. I think he's like a back end rotation wing.
That's how I see him, too. I love the energy. That is just going to pick your teammates up when you play that hard, and that's what he brings. He brings that extra intangible factor. So I like him overall. I think he's going to be a rotation guy. We'll just see how high the ceiling is with his shooting. He's just really aggressive, and that's what I like. Like, he was much more aggressive attacking closeouts than I thought he'd be.
Yep.
And that goes back to last summer league. You just saw him like basically every chance he had, he was going to the rim. It doesn't translate as well when you're not in summer league, of course, because you're dealing with more athletic players in the paint. He's not the most explosive athlete, but I just generally like his ability to absorb contact around the rim, and I just like his mental approach to the game.
Yeah, no question. Ty Wallace is the next guy. I actually would have him ahead of Sindarius Thornwell, weirdly, even though he only played 30 games. What I saw from him in those 30 games I thought was really impressive. Averaged almost 10 points, 3 rebounds, 3 assists a game, 45% from the field. Not much of a shooter still, but pretty good defender who can defend multiple positions 1 through 3 pretty competently, and can play point guard. Like, him and Sindarius Thornwell are very different people, and whenever we're talking about two guys with very questionable jump shots, I'm probably going to default to the guy who has more positional size.
I think that's fair. Honestly, they're pretty, to me, I mean, you can have Wallace initiate your offense a little bit more because, I mean, of course, he played point guard at Cal. He has more dribbling ability than Sindarius does, but I don't think he doesn't have a pull-up, right? So, I mean, his utility there is kind of limited. He's not an incredible passer. He's very capable. He kind of just brings a lot of different skill sets to the game as a two-way player, but it comes down to the shot again. And I don't trust his mechanics at all. Just watching him shoot, I'm not high on his delivery. And whenever you see him shoot, like, for the most part with me, I'm not sure if this is reflected in the synergy stats, but it seems like he's wide the hell open. Like, nobody's really guarding him, and that just kills your spacing a little bit. But I like the dice roll that the Clippers took. I think it was smart. To my knowledge, he hasn't signed a new contract yet. I would definitely, if I was a team, I would invest a guaranteed minimum kind of deal with him. I think he's worth it. But I just don't have a lot of optimism on the shooting ever evolving into like a high-end rotation caliber player.
Yeah, from what I know, he's still a restricted free agent for them, right?
I believe so. I don't think they rescinded his qualifying offer when they could. So I think he's definitely still restricted. Which
makes this very, very convoluted and confusing because they still have, I believe, 16 guaranteed contracts, right?
15 plus Patrick Beverley, who's basically a de facto guarantee because he's so good. Right. I mean, he's a starting caliber player. So, yeah, 16 guys.
Yeah, so it's tough for me to kind of figure out what ends up happening with him, but I agree with you that I think someone should actually just guarantee him a roster spot. And the reason that we're talking about him here is because where else would we talk about him?
That is very correct. Yeah, I mean, he's worth talking about. I think that he played really well in G League. He had some really awesome statistical performances down there. So I think he had like a 5x5 game, one of the only ones to ever do that in the G League. So you can see kind of the overall abilities he has. He can contribute kind of a little bit of everything, but being a jack of all trades, master of none, and taking a lot off the table as a shooter, I just don't know how valuable that is in the modern game. But I would, again, take a dice roll on him.
It's interesting because we always talk about versatility as being essential now, and he brings a lot of it, but there is that one skill that is so important in today's game, and it's the ability to shoot and space the floor, and it is complicating for Ty Wallace and his potential future. The next guy is going to be Jawun Evans because I love Jawun Evans. I'm not sure he's an NBA player, but I hope he is.
I liked him too. I mean, I loved him as a prospect. He was so fun to watch in college, Oklahoma State, run pick and roll, one of the most high usage pick and roll guards we've seen, could make reads. He wasn't Trae Young as a passer, in my opinion, but he was pretty damn good as a passer. You could see the floor, make that skip pass. It just comes down to the jump shot for him because he just doesn't have the explosiveness. He doesn't have the size. And this is kind of a lesson for me personally. Like, I liked a lot of his attributes. I think he's a physical defender. Like, he will pick you up. There was these James Harden highlights last year where, he was really getting into his body. He's kind of a bulldog as far as build. But you can only do so much when you're 6 foot or 6'1". Like, you have to be so good offensively. And his jump shot, I think he just takes a lot of mid-range shots, frankly. Like, he's not comfortable from NBA 3. When he takes them, I don't think he's been bad. I watched a lot of his tape. I think he might have some upside as a pull-up shooter from there. But the fact that he takes so many mid-range shots, you just have to be so good shooting those. And I would like him to be a little bit more assertive, taking more threes. But, yeah, I think he tops out as a high-level backup point guard. But if he hits and he shoots the ball better, I do think he's kind of the ideal backup point guard in the modern game because you can run your offense through him, he can play pick and roll, he can shoot, and you want guys who can score in kind of lower minute settings. So he fits that archetype. That's why I liked him a lot. But if he can't shoot the ball, I think that's where the whole emphasis comes down to is he a good pull-up shooter? Can he play off the ball at all? That's going to be the keys.
So, yeah, what scares me with him going forward is the fact that he's never really been a confident shooter. Like, even though he made 41% of his threes at Oklahoma State, he only took 135 of them over the course of his 52 games. So, like, that's a problem. Like, the fact that he's not confident enough in that jump shot to be able to take them is an issue. And it showed in his three-point percentage last year, 27.8%. I was very nervous after watching him at Summer League. He shot 28% overall from the field. It's not great. It's not great at all. He did limit turnovers. He did do a decent job getting the team into its offense and distributing, but he was really good at Summer League last year, I thought, and he was not very good at Summer League this year.
Very much agree. You know, a dynamic pick and roll player, when he can play that way, it just comes down to the confidence in the pull-up three, and we just haven't seen that. Like, he can create separation pretty well for a smaller player. Like, he's got really good crossovers. He's pretty deceptive, honestly. It's just the shooting. I mean, if he can shoot, I think he's an NBA player. If he can't, and he doesn't develop that confidence from three, maybe he's not.
Angel Delgado and Johnathan Motley. Any real takes here?
I mean, Johnathan Motley is a bull, man. Like that one clip in Summer League where he literally moved Ayton out of the way, which is not the easiest thing to do. He literally just ducked down, used his leverage, and knocked Ayton back 2 feet and then laid the ball in. He's just kind of fun to watch in that way. I'm not sure. I mean, I don't really think he's an NBA player. He can't really do anything offensively that I really value that much as far as spacing the floor, being a dynamic lob threat. But he's just fun, man. I don't have much to say on Angel Delgado, so I'll let you take that one away.
Yeah, Motley is definitely the better of the two. I think he somehow started 4 games last year in the actual NBA, weirdly. Averaged 9 points and 4.5 rebounds a game, 53% from the field. I had him as like a borderline first rounder before I knew about the degenerative knee condition. So I like him enough as like a potential backup big man. If he can protect the rim at all, that's always been like kind of the big question. Like, his tools say he should be a much better rim protector than what he actually is. And I am at least intrigued. I will say that I am at least interested in what his potential is.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, he's not the most vertical athlete as far as that goes, but he does have the strength and enough length, I think, maybe to get by there, but I'm not really betting on that. It's just, I don't really know what he does that I really value that much. He's not like a rim runner type. He's just a bull, man. You get him the ball in the post sometimes and he'll just move guys, but again, that's like a 5th big to me in the NBA.
Yeah, no, like I said, like, I think his ceiling is probably back up like 4th big. So,
yep.
Same boat on that one. Angel Delgado, he's just a rebounding beast at St. Seton Hall. Good Lord. It's been a long podcast already. Seton Hall, he is one of the best rebounders in this draft class. Doesn't have much offensive game. He is a pretty sneaky good passer, though. But a lot of it was stand still out of the block, not really passing on the move. He's not like slow like Okafor. He's in much better shape than what Okafor is, but there is some of that there.
Got it. Yeah, I didn't watch a lot of Big East last year, so I don't have a lot of Seton Hall takes.
Big East basketball, sneaky fun because all of the teams played like wildly up tempo.
Yep.
Let's move on to the Lakers.
Let's go.
Assuredly end well for us talking about the Lakers.
I'm not going to give up my address ever after this, so this is my final voice on this podcast. No, I have pretty much generally good things to say about these guys. So.
Yeah, I agree. Do we want to talk about them like in a vacuum as NBA players, or do we want to talk about them in terms of them revolving around LeBron? Because now that's kind of what they do.
I think we kind of got to do both almost. This is what kind of makes this so fascinating, is because there's almost 2 layers to this. Is what we thought of them as prospects, and then when you insert someone like LeBron, that changes kind of the calculus for especially Lonzo Ball, in my opinion. So I think that we have to kind of build that into the discussion and discuss both different elements.
Okay, so I have Brandon Ingram at the top of my list. Do you have Lonzo?
I have Lonzo, but I have them both in the same tier.
Okay, I have Brandon like very clearly ahead of the rest of these guys. I think Brandon Ingram's really good. I will let you start, though, on Ingram.
Okay, so historically, I thought I was on the higher end because Ingram's gotten a lot of negative press because he came out of the gate, wasn't fantastic to start, especially comparing him to Ben Simmons and that whole draft discussion. If you put it relative to that, I think you could call him disappointing, even though I don't feel that way personally. But I'm not as high on him as some people seem to be now. So I think I'm more of a moderate as far as approach here.
Okay, so for reference, I think he is a future All-Star.
I think he can be. I don't think it's definite by any means. I think that's definitely in his range of outcomes. This is what kind of makes Ingram so tantalizing, in my opinion, is because I can't say with certainty that he is, of course, because it's hard to have utmost confidence in something like that, but I wouldn't be surprised at all.
Yeah, look, I'm not saying like I think he is for sure, but I think that like that is his... I would say that's his most likely outcome, is that he ends up something like an all-star level player. 16 points, 5 rebounds, 4 assists a game. Last year, that's very, very good. Darn near league average true shooting percentage, 53.6. I want to say it was like at 55 flat last year, league average true shooting percentage. Turnover rate jumped a little bit, which was worrisome, but his overall usage jumped quite a bit as well. He played a good amount as like a half-court initiator for them, which was interesting to me. So I am optimistic on his trajectory, despite some of the worries that kind of cropped up over the course of last year.
My ultimate thing with Ingram is I think he's pretty good at a lot of things. I think he's an underrated passer as far as feel. He's not a high-level kind of drive and kick guy, but he does have vision. He looks to pass. He's kind of unselfish there. I've always been impressed with that, even at Duke. I think that he's kind of like maybe Cam Reddish-esque to me there as far as his ability to read the play. Not high level, but good enough to where you can see him being a playmaking wing. He's got a good enough handle. The jump shooting, again, this is kind of what a lot of this comes down to. Off the catch, he's improved a little bit. I mean, you can see the 39% from 3 last year, 10% higher, but he's taking far less threes than he did the year before. And I think that's kind of a reflection of the fact that he's getting to the lane more, like he is driving. Yeah,
he's not like taking a wild amount less. He just played 20 fewer games last year.
Yeah, but the rate is definitely less.
Yeah, it's like half a 3-point attempt a game. So it's less, but it's not like it's not like insane.
Yeah, but I think I just look at it overall. Like he took 27% of his shots. His 3-point attempt rate was 27% his rookie year, and then it dropped down to 13.8%. So it's about half as far as if you weigh that in there. So I think that's representative of what you noted, though. Like he was initiating the offense more. He was playing in pick and roll because he was kind of their go-to scorer. Like that's not really Alonzo's game, and they don't really have anybody like that on the roster last year. Like Kentavious Caldwell Pope probably thought he was, but he's not really that guy. He's not cut out to be. So I think they relied on Ingram to create a lot in pick and roll. Optimally, I'm not sure if that's his game because I don't know if he has the pull-up ability. And that's kind of what it comes down to me is his archetype. He doesn't have a very good first step. He uses long strides to get to the rim. He did improve as a finisher, at least last time I checked, as far as his finishing acumen. He uses length a little bit better, which is going to be a real nightmare to deal with because he can really extend and get to places that it's hard to block his shot, but you can get into his body and kind of deter him a little bit. So where this comes down to me, and I'm curious in your thoughts on this, like where do you see his impact coming? I guess offensively, start there. Like where do you see him being proficient at a level to where he'd be an all-star?
So I think that where we have to start with him is just kind of noting that every kind of step along the way for him, it's always taken time. Like in high school, he was kind of a late bloomer who people knew about throughout his high school career, but he jumped into like the top 5 recruits in the country in his senior year because he figured out how to adjust to the way the game was played, basically, at the elite level in high school. At Duke, it took him 2 months to really figure out how to deal with the physicality of college basketball. It seems like it took him like maybe a year and like a quarter to really figure out how to use his length and use his body in NBA basketball, I think. And now it seems like he's starting to do it. I think that the ability to use long strides like he can, it's really tough for defenders to guard that. Like I think that's one of the things I'm learning most over the last like couple of years. Like you look at guys like Jason Tatum, Donovan Mitchell. Like Mitchell is an explosive athlete, but Mitchell's also a long strider in the same way that Tatum is. You can look at RJ Barrett as well. It's really hard for guys to guard him because he utilizes those long strides. When you have that kind of stride length, I don't know that it really matters that you're not like hyper explosive, especially in the case of Ingram where he's 6'10" with like a 7'4" wingspan now. Having said that, his problem is the center of gravity in the core. He really struggles whenever he gets knocked off his position at all. That's where he needs to keep getting stronger, and I think he realizes that. He knows that he needs to keep getting more physically capable throughout his core. Otherwise, it's just going to continue to be an issue. He's just not going to be able to really do much of anything if he can't just keep his position.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think for me, just to give some quick context as far as his ability to get to the rim, last year, 271 times in the half court, he had attempts around the basket. The year before, playing far more games, 179. So I think that goes to your point of learning how to utilize his length and his strides getting to the basket. I think he has improved there. I think for sure. I'm not sure what setting that comes in, though. That's what the interesting part is to me, and what makes the LeBron fit so fascinating is because last year Ingram was doing a lot of pick and roll, getting to the rim that way. I'm not sure if he's a good enough overall creator for himself and for others to really be high level there. But if we're talking about attacking a closeout, I think that that's when he becomes really, really interesting. If you give him open lanes where he can get to the basket in one dribble, I think that's where you see the impact. And this is kind of, again, the overall context of playing with a guy like LeBron who puts all these guys in different roles because he is the initiator. He's the guy that can literally, he's the only guy I've ever seen in NBA history where you can just give the ball to and he can create basically everything for you. So this is going to put Brandon, go ahead.
Can I also mention the fact that he was ridiculous around the basket last year too? Like, or in transition as well. Like he's a very, very good transition early offense player as well. Not necessarily your traditional guy who you do want initiating the offense on a good team. Maybe he gets there, but so much of this is about growth trajectory, right? The fact that he took such a big leap from year one to year two, like he was probably a league average player last year, right? Like something in that range after being a disaster in year one.
I think that's fair. Honestly, I'm pretty optimistic on his, like, I guess, median outcome. It's just my question for you is, where do you see the upside coming from? Because to me, it has to come through shooting. Like I don't think he's a good enough creator for others, a good enough guy to get to the rim in one-on-one situations against the best defenders in the league. Like, he doesn't have either the threat of his pull-up, he doesn't have a great first step. He's not going to create in dynamic fashion one-on-one. I know the Lakers aren't going to run a lot of that offense. So LeBron's going to do that stuff. But to really reach that ceiling outcome of being an all-star player, I think it's going to come down to the shooting. Like, he has to develop into like a kick-ass off the catch shooter, a guy who can really attack closeouts and make a secondary play. And then in time, I think down the road, you're going to need to see him initiate the offense more. He's going to have to shoot threes off the dribble, in my opinion. And that's just not something he has in his game right now. Most of that is from the mid-range.
Ooh, wow. You think he has to shoot threes off the dribble? Okay. Yep. I don't know that he has to do that necessarily, and I think he actually is going to be a good shooter off the catch at some point. He's not quite there right now. Like, he's only at 50% effective field goal percentage off the catch. Not sure how many threes out of that group he took. It looks like it was maybe like half of his overall made shots last year off the catch were threes. So, like, I think he actually can shoot off the catch, though. Like, he was known as a shot maker in high school. That's the thing. Like, that's kind of where I always come back to. Like, he's always made shots, and I know that he didn't make free throws, but like at Duke, he was a 41% three-point shooter who got his shot whenever he wanted. And last year in the NBA, he could create his shot basically whenever he wanted. It's just he's not strong enough to finish the shot often. Do we think that's fair?
I think that's in part fair. I just don't see, he wasn't a dynamic off the dribble shooter at Duke either. Like, that's never been a part of his game. And when I say off the dribble threes, I'm talking about his absolute ceiling. Like, I don't think he needs that to be an effective player for sure. I think that's more off the catch. But like, if he's going to initiate your offense,
like him shooting off the dribble threes, like that's like him going from a 20-point per game shooter to like a 25-point per game shooter.
Sure. And I think that's what is required to take that ultimate leap into the player that some think he can be. Because I think there are people out there that really still believe in that high-end ceiling outcome.
Well, like, I think what do we think some people think he can be is my question. Because like I think he can be a borderline all-star. Like, is that high-end? I don't really know. I
think that's like upper high-end. That's not the absolute high-end, I don't think. I think there are people that are still even higher on him than that, just judging by, I mean, the comparisons to Ben Simmons and stuff. There's still a lot of people that think that Ingram's going to be the better player, and Simmons is on a trajectory to be a top 10 player in the league, in my opinion. So I think you have to look at it like, if you really are going to be like a top 10 player, if Ingram's going to get to that level for me, he has to be like Paul George almost, where he's just such a good shooter. Like, he can shoot off motion, he can shoot off the catch, he can shoot off the dribble at times, he can run a secondary pick and roll, he can create a shot when you need one, he can shoot over the top. I think he's going to have to be that guy. He's going to have to come from the mid post. In self-creation settings, have to come from maybe pick and roll, isolation. And when you have the threat of your shot, that opens up his strides. Like, I don't really trust his first step. I think guys can play a little bit off of him. And in a one-on-one setting, again, that's going to be a negative overall. But if he can get to that level, I think that's what thrusts him from like maybe a good two-way wing that can play make secondarily to a guy that you can run your offense through at least some of the time.
Yeah, I think that I'm mostly at the stage where I think he's like a good second guy. Like, I think top 10 is crazy. Like, I think he's like, his ceiling is like top 30 player in the NBA. Like, thinking he can be a top 10 player is kind of crazy to me.
I'm just trying to capture the entire range of outcomes. I don't think that personally. Like, I think we're kind of in lockstep here for the most part. I'm just giving like the ultimate range of outcomes because Ingram's kind of a tantalizing player, frankly. Like, he has some upside, but I'm not sure the upside is to the level that a lot of people do. And I also don't think his downside is necessarily negative. He does enough things, and you talked about his rate of improvement. I think he's going to be able to develop skills enough to be, a quality starter. I'm not sure about a second option on a title team. I don't feel comfortable enough with his shooting yet, but for me, it's about the shot.
So over the last 40 years, there have only been 14 players to average 16 points, 3.9 assists, and 5 rebounds a game. He's one of them. That's 21 and under players, and he did it in his age 20 season. That feels pretty good, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's another point, too, that you've made is he's young. This is a really young kid, and he's already progressed from year 1 to year 2. And
he's younger than Josh Jackson for Phoenix. He's very good.
Yeah, that's the thing is, he can develop at rates we might not be able to anticipate. I'm just trying to capture, even if you're the most optimistic guy on Ingram, where is the value coming from necessarily, concretely? You know what I mean? It's going to be able to do a little bit of everything, but those kinds of players aren't really the stars. They're more like star role player types.
Yeah, and I think that's what he is. I think he's it is ceiling a 20-point, 7 rebound, 5 assist a game guy. That's pretty darn close to a star, but it's not the guy who's going to lead a team to a title. You know what I mean?
Yes, and I can see that. I mean, I'm not sure about 5 assists. I don't really judge it by production.
He averaged 4 last year. It's pretty good.
Yeah, no, definitely. But I just don't know if he's going to be in that role. You know what I mean? Last year, the Lakers were very kind of an atypical team because Lonzo's an atypical player. But yeah, what do you think about Ingram's defense overall? Because I think we've kind of hashed out the offense. What do you think about him defensively?
It's so hard because he's just not strong enough yet. So much of it depends on what you think his long-term body looks like. Can he actually be can he actually get up to 225 pounds versus 190 or 200? I don't know. If he gets up to even 215, 220, I feel like he's a totally different defender than what he is now. And even now, his length causes very real problems for opposing teams.
Oh, absolutely. I've been kind of in on his defense for the most part. He still lapses a lot. He does a lot of young guy things, but there's been times where he's on the weak side and he's guarding 2 guys. He's playing that gap defense, and his length matters. He can stay close enough, I think. He's not super quick twitch. He doesn't have the strength, but he does have that length, and he does have the size to where if he's within his range with his wingspan, he will alter your shot. So that's what gives him outs to being, I think, an overall net positive defender. He's not a lockdown defender. He's not a perimeter stopper to me. He just doesn't have that level of athleticism. But I do think in the holistic concept of the team, he's going to get there. I'm not sure. Again, he's not Lonzo as far as a team defender, but he's going to be good enough to where he can utilize his length to really impact plays.
Yeah, I think I agree with you there. Generally, I'm very in on his team defense. I do wonder if the lateral quickness and the long legs, it's kind of like what we talk about with Mikal Bridges, where his long legs kind of cause him issues in terms of sliding and getting that first slide going, and it allows him to get blown by occasionally. I think that could kind of happen, and I think it does happen with Brandon Ingram. But his help defense is, like you said, I think it's actually quite good, except for when he gets lost. I would imagine that's probably one of the things they really try and work on this year, just with LeBron James being on this roster. Right now, Brandon Ingram's their second best player, right?
I mean, that's a convoluted question, and we'll get to with Lonzo. But I think that it's worth mentioning, too, schematically, the Lakers want to switch everything, right? That's what they're they're kind of designed. We talked about this with Donovan Mitchell and the Jazz and what Lonzo unlocks for that team. They want to switch. I think Ingram's going to be good enough at that. And again, his length is going to matter. I'm not sure if he's going to be that small forward kind of big wing stopper that maybe some think he can be. Like you noted, the strength, the ability to anchor, and like the lower body balance. And he doesn't have the lateral agility that's elite. So we'll see. And I don't really feel confident enough saying that he's like a high-level team defender or anything. I just think from the tape that I've seen, I think he looks passable for his age. Like I don't see him as a negative. He doesn't stand out in like super negative fashion. I think like Kyle Kuzma, for example, is more of a negative as an overall team defender. Yeah. I think Ingram's a step up from that. So that's kind of how I see him projection-wise. And my final point on him is just I think he was getting like Giannis comparisons last year by a lot of people. And I don't see that in his range of outcomes. That's kind of what I was getting at with his ceiling. I don't think he's going to be that level of athlete and stuff. So I just want that on the record to be clear.
Yeah, like body control and balance are important. Like he's nowhere near that level with Giannis. But he's really good. He's a good athlete at 6'9" yes. with a 7'4" wingspan or whatever. And very coordinated at that size. Like you put out lineups with him, LeBron, Josh Hart, Lonzo, and like Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. That is going to be very difficult for opposing teams to score on.
Very much agree defensively. And then I think offensively, the stride length, like you said, if you get him in a catch and shoot setting where he can attack closeouts, you get those big space-eating strides like laterally where he can do those big spin moves. And that's kind of where I thought he had a little bit of Giannis. He doesn't have the strength, but he has those ability to really extend to both areas of the floor and then kind of hit you with a spin move. It's just really hard to guard those guys in space and advantage situation or advantage scoring situation. So that's kind of how I see him being utilized.
Yeah, so like I would have Brandon Ingram, man, like probably just like slightly above Lonzo, who I have slightly above both Kuzma and Hart in terms of where I would tier these guys. Do we think that's fair?
Yeah, it's definitely fair. I have Lonzo ahead of Ingram. I don't think it's a huge gap or anything, but I definitely have Lonzo ahead of Ingram in the same tier, and then you drop off a little bit to Hart and Kuzma. I just see more upside with Ball and Ingram. And it's just really interesting to compare Ball and Ingram. I think that's one of the most fascinating comparisons when you talk about prospects on a team, just because Ball has such stark strengths, like and then such stark weaknesses. And Ingram's kind of good at everything, but not great at anything.
Yeah, so let's talk about Lonzo. 10 points, 7 rebounds, 7 assists during his rookie season. Generally, I would say that I think it was a successful rookie season. I would also just note, per our previous conversation, Lonzo Ball is about a month and a half older than Brandon Ingram, or a month and a half younger, than Brandon Ingram. So basically along the same trajectory here in terms of age gaps. And to be honest, I would say that Brandon is, probably plays younger just because his body isn't nearly as physically developed as Lonzo's is. So let's kind of talk about where we think Lonzo can go from here. I would imagine that you think most of it ties to the shot, correct?
Absolutely. I definitely think it ties to, first of all, the off-the-catch shooting just has to get to the level that it was in college where the confidence was there. And this is something that I understand if you didn't watch Lonzo at UCLA and you just watched his rookie year where he was kind of tentative at times and he didn't really have that same, like, fuck you confidence that he had at UCLA when he was, like, guys feared him as a shooter. Like they did not leave him open like they did in summer league or in the NBA this season. Like when he was barely open in college, and when he was, like guys were closing out hard to him. They wanted to take that three away. So for me, it comes down to confidence. His mechanics are never going to be optimized, but again, I think like the end result, he gets good alignment. He just has a funky shot line the way he gets there, but when he snaps his wrist, it's a little bit lower, but honestly, he has that feet sweep forward. He gets good arc. And the alignment, he gets his elbow in enough to where I'm not someone who's like, he needs to overhaul his mechanics. I think that'd be a mistake. I just think he needs to get that mentality, that rhythm, that confidence back that he had in college to be an off-the-catch shooter.
I agree with all of that generally, but I think that it severely limits what his utility is as a shooter. Like all of those things, like I don't think you can really overhaul his mechanics, but I just generally believe him to be a limited pull-up guy. Like, he can't pull up to the right. Like, that's just kind of the way it is in the NBA. He is not going to be able to pull up going to the right. He is going to be able to pull up going to the left, but it's all going to have to be step back, I think, for the most part. Like, he's not going to be a guy who can go forward, stop and pop and pull up straight up. It's going to have to be a step back, and that obviously becomes a little bit harder sometimes. Sometimes it's good. Like, if you're at the 20-foot range, you step back behind the three-point line, great. But, like, that's a very like singular example, I guess is the way to put it. In terms of his jump shot in general, I agree with you. I think he will be better than a 30.5% three-point shooter, because I think that the Lakers will work to optimize his game with LeBron James around and put him in better shots to shoot the basketball. I think his confidence will be better than what it was this year. I don't think he'll be a 41% three-point shooter in the NBA, though, like he was in college.
Oh, I don't either. And just to be clear, I'm talking very strictly about his off the catch shooting, and maybe off the movement a little bit, because he showed that at UCLA. I have very big druthers with his pull-up ability, and that's, that was built into the draft process. I was pretty adamant about this as far as his lead guard potential. We've talked about this ad nauseum, but the guy's predictable, man. And it's hard to be predictable when you're not an elite athlete. You know what I mean? Like, I do think that he has enough pull-up ability where if you duck really under the screen, I think he's going to be okay there, because then it becomes kind of like a catch and shoot where he has time and space. And his pull-up ability last year, like, off the dribble shots in the half court, he was 53rd percentile. It wasn't bad, but I think a lot of those attempts, frankly, were when teams started really ducking under on him, and he had those open shots, which is good. Like, he has to be able to hit that to force them to defend him a different way. And I think teams got smart, and they started chasing him around. And it's like, okay, we're going to make you shoot these floaters. We're going to make you finish around the rim, which I think is his biggest weakness, honestly. I mean, it's pretty close with his pull-up ability, but his ability as an on-ball finisher in pick and roll. We talked about this. He's an incredible cutter off the ball. That's why I think he's going to be really good with LeBron. But his on-ball creation, his handle isn't very good, not very deceptive, and he's just not very advanced getting to his spots, getting to the rim, finishing through contact, not explosive off of 1 foot. Just lacks a lot of the flexibility in that area. And combined with his balance, which you also see in his pull-up, his balance is just not there. He's not good at starting and stopping. Yeah, no, I totally 100% agree with that. Whenever we're talking about him as a driver now, and in terms of his pick and roll ability, in terms of his ability to create offense both for himself and others, I am concerned about the amount that he avoided contact last year, because he was so bad from the foul line. It's a great point. I think that definitely builds into the calculus. Either that or just innately not being that aggressive as a guy who flies into bodies. Like, De'Aaron Fox will just fly right into you. Guy's fearless as far as drawing contact, and he's not the best free throw shooter, but it's like, I think that definitely plays into it. I just want to see Lonzo be a little bit more physical, which makes him such a weird player, because he's so freaking physical defensively at times. Like, he'll switch and really just defend the hell out of you in the post, but you don't see that same physicality as a guy who attacks the rim.
Well, honestly, I really do think that he doesn't want to go to the foul line based off of last year. And then also, he was a piss-poor finisher around the basket last year. He was 11th percentile, 45.5% in the half court last year. That's a very real problem. He needs to be able to finish around the basket, or like just needs to be able to make free throws. Like, he cannot be a wholly perimeter player. Otherwise, this doesn't work.
And I agree. And I think that even that was the case when you really sussed through what his finishes were at UCLA. So many of them came off the ball as a cutter. Like, he rarely got to the rim in the half court, and that's important, right? Because the ability to get to the rim, if you're a lead guard, that's important. You have to be able to be almost like a 3-level scorer. If you can't do that, you become, like, so much emphasis comes on your shot, your ability to create space for your pull-up. It almost necessitates that you're a pull-up three-point shooter, even when you're tightly guarded. So that's a tough sell. I think when you suss out the differences there, much better cutter, explosive off 2 feet when he can really load up. Not good when he's a straight line pick and roll guy who can, like, deceptively get to the rim. That's just never been his game.
So let's talk about the good parts here, I would say. The good part, I would say, number one of his game was the defense last year. His defense was incredible. He was probably not a all-NBA level defender, but he was maybe, like, if it went down to, like, 6 teams, like, if we did, how many guards would that be? That'd be 12 guards. He's probably like a top 20 guard in the NBA defensively.
I think he might even be higher than that, frankly. I mean, it's hard when you start factoring 2 guards, I guess. But for point guard defenders, I think he was in the top 5. Like, he's just what he can do at that position at his size. His team defense is freaking unreal. Like, it's literally 99th percentile for guards. It's that good. Like, his ability to get deflections, his effort level, but just the instant ability to decipher a play. Like, he knows exactly when to rotate down to challenge the post and double. He knows when to rotate over. He's incredible on closeouts because he can cover so much ground. Like, he's an underrated athlete, in my opinion. He's not functional on the ball offensively. That's what people point to. But as far as, like, off the ball defensively, he's really fast, and it gets helped because he's so quick at identifying things. It just makes him an elite level team defender. When you're 6'6", you can protect the rim a little bit from the weak side. Just really high level there.
Yeah, he's a really, really good athlete, I think, defensively, utilizes everything. He's, like you said, an underrated athlete. He's just a bad ball handler, and that's where things kind of come into play. He has a very loose handle, and it doesn't allow him to get as much out of his quickness as you would hope for, and as much out of his explosiveness off of 2 feet as you would hope for. So instinctually, though, I mean, we know that he is just thinks the game at a totally different level than what most human beings do. Very, very smart player on the basketball floor, has great feel for the game, makes good decisions with the ball, just generally in his hands, makes very creative passes, especially in the half court. It's not always primary assists as well with him. It's secondary assists. He gets the ball moving. He initiates. He doesn't really care if he's the guy getting the final assist. Like, it's going to be funny watching him and Rajon Rondo in that way, because Rondo so often is the guy that pounds the basketball, whereas Lonzo is happy to headman the ball, get it up the court, and just kind of get the team going and get the team into its proper spacing. That's just going to be a very interesting juxtaposition of styles for pass-first point guards.
Absolutely. And I think for me, just holistically looking at Lonzo as a player, elite level decision maker. We're talking about a ruthless decision maker in transition. He will make you pay every time you fuck up in transition. He will make that outlet pass immediately. He identifies that stuff. I think that gives the Lakers extra value in that setting. I've always viewed him more as like a transition point guard, half court secondary or wing type. That's just how I see his game as far as creation goes. But I think his brain is elite. Like I have no issues with his decision making. I think it's honestly one of the best we've seen from a young prospect. That's going to help him. And I think we have to put this overall in context with playing with LeBron, because I can understand a lot of the national writers, especially that don't watch college, will say, like, what is a guy who shoots 30% from three going to do? Like, when LeBron has the ball and LeBron's going to have the ball a lot, what's he really going to do off the ball if he's not a shooter? And I would agree with that analysis for most every player in the NBA. I think that shooting is paramount. Obviously, it's still paramount for Lonzo. But the fact that he is such an elite level cutter and he identifies things so quickly, like, even if he gets swung the ball in a secondary setting, he knows where everybody is already. Like, that ball is not going to stick. It's going to go to a skip. It's going to go to an immediate entry. So there are just avenues that are maybe subtle, but I think they're going to make a ton of difference with someone like him, just because he's so good at moving off the ball and identifying both spaces for himself and for his teammates.
Generally, I think I agree with you on this. The half-court spacing is interesting. The full-court potential of this Lakers offense is terrifying to me.
Yes.
They just have so many great decision makers on the floor. Like, even Brandon Ingram, as I mentioned, unbelievable transition player. He was like in the 82nd percentile last year in terms of transition offense last year. Lonzo Ball is someone who will at least make tremendous passes in transition. If you look at what his percentile finishes were last year in offense, according to Synergy, 8th percentile overall, 5th percentile in transition offense, whenever you're talking about himself alone, 77th percentile whenever you're talking about his efficiency with passes, 43rd percentile in transition when you're talking about his efficiency with passes. He gets so much of an added value to being an offensive player just by being able to make incredible decisions consistently.
And that's the way the Lakers want to play. They want to get up and down. They have the athletes to do that. Can you really profile that high level to a playoff setting? Like, I tend to downplay transition and we're talking about ultimate ceiling outcome, because at a certain point, you're going to have to play half-court basketball and you're going to have to execute in the half-court. So that's why I put a lot of emphasis on Lonzo's off-ball movement and his cutting and his development as a shooter. Like, I think if I just getting to the general takeaway with Lonzo for me, if he shoots the ball off the catch, I think he's an elite level role player, because he's awesome defensively. He doesn't take anything off the table on that end as far as a guy who is a negative defender. He's going to be a plus point guard defender. He's not great at point of attack navigating screens, but he's going to switch, and he's really good at that. He's good timing on switches, good rotations there. If he can shoot the ball off the catch, that's a really valuable player. That's a two-way player with elite level brain, an elite level decision maker. That's what it comes down to as far as his maybe higher end median outcome. If you don't feel great about projecting a shot off the catch, I've never really seen the ceiling with him, like being like a star, right? Because I think you need more creation acumen to get to that level.
Yeah, no, I think I agree with you. If he's never a 33% 3-point shooter, is he a starter?
I still think so. I just think his defense and his passing are too good. And it's just one of those situations where it's atypical from what we're used to. He's such a unique caliber player that we've never really seen before. I do think so, but I do think he's going to get above 33% from three. I think he's going to be more 35, 36, maybe a little bit higher. I don't see him being like 40% on high volume necessarily, but I think if he's 35, 36%, you can survive with that pretty easily.
Yes, I agree. I think like 37% is probably the peak, and I would be surprised if it's more than like 35. I think that's where I'm at.
So last question for you here. Like, what do you think about the fit? I mean, we've talked about a little bit of the fit with LeBron, but would you rather them have just kept, like in a vacuum, just concerning their prospects and their development in a vacuum? Would you rather them have just kept Lonzo and say, we want you to work on your point guard ability, we want you to initiate the offense? Or do you think it's better to put him in a situation that maybe projects better to his game as a secondary, playing off a star caliber player like LeBron, where a lot of guys were high on his contribution there as far as like amplifying better talent?
I think it's better to have him with LeBron if you think he can shoot. If you think he can get to like 35% from three, yes, I think it's better to have him with LeBron as like a secondary creator. I do think that the presence of Rajon Rondo will help him. The biggest thing for him, though, just in general, and it continues to be the thing that's not talked about with his game enough, is that he needs to handle the ball better. He needs to have a tighter handle, needs to be able to make plays going right to left, left to right, and needs to be able to change pace with his handle, because that is something he does not do well at all right now. If he can do that, it will unlock the rest of his game and make life so much easier for the Lakers.
And I'm pretty skeptical he can, frankly, to a high level. And that's what my issue was with him as a prospect. Everybody wanted to cut him for the defense against like De'Aaron Fox in the tournament. For me, it was always his handle. That was the area where I didn't see him ever becoming the kind of player he'd need to be kind of a straight lead guard type.
Yes, I agree. Let's move on. Let's talk about Josh Hart or Kyle Kuzma. Which one do you go to next?
Either one. I have them pretty close. Either argument for both. I love Josh Hart. I realize most people have Kyle Kuzma ahead of him, so maybe you can take it away with Kuzma.
Yeah, let's talk about Kuzma. Would you say he is a starter, like quality player in the NBA, or someone who profiles better as a sixth man?
Ooh, that's a great question. I think he is a starting talent in the NBA. I'm not sure if he's a starting talent on a winning team yet, but I do think he has the talent to start on a lot of different teams in the NBA.
I would agree with you. I think he is a starting quality player. Just a ridiculous offensive player right now.
Yes.
How much of that took you by surprise last year? How much of what he showed offensively were you not expecting?
Basically all of it. I mean, like my sample, I didn't watch a lot of him in college. We're talking like maybe 2 games. So my sample wasn't great, and he wasn't utilized in the same kind of open setting. You immediately saw in preseason, even like obviously in summer league, but in preseason even, you're like, this kind of looks real, right? I think I tweeted something like that to that effect, that people were like, I think you're overreacting. It's like sometimes when you see things on tape, even if it's a lower stage, like even summer league, for example, you can still make observations. And I think Kuzma's fluidity as a closeout attacker, that's something that Jason Tatum is incredible at too. But just that first step and that aggressiveness on closeouts, Kuzma's touch is freaking unreal on the move. He can finish at so many different angles on the move, in conjunction with his catch and shoot shot, which he has that sweet one motion release that he worked on postseason at Utah, and it got to a level at the combine where we've talked about this as far as mistakes in the past in our evaluations, didn't get nearly enough credit for that development. But a guy, you start with the fact that he can shoot off the catch from three, and that he's an elite level closeout attacker who has pretty underrated vision. Like maybe he's not a great decision maker yet, but honestly, like I don't know if there's like 10 guys in the league that have better touch than he does as a finisher.
Yeah, so I'm going to pump the brakes a touch on that. 37th percentile last year as a finisher. That's not
I'm talking floaters. Like he's 76th percentile floaters. Like that. I'm talking like floating shots, different angles. Like he's not that explosive when he's in traffic, but as far as just pure touch, I think he's pretty incredible.
That I think is fair. He does have very, very good touch on floaters, particularly, but like that still has somewhat limited value, right? Because like he was really, really good at them and was still 46% from the field.
Yes, 100%. Yeah, there's definitely deficiencies in his finishing. I wasn't saying like he's the best finisher in the NBA, but just his touch specifically, I do think that is unique to him. Maybe not quite TJ Warren level, but just that kind of player is kind of unique and a little bit awkward, but I think it works for him.
Well, the difference between him and TJ Warren, and why I think he's better than TJ Warren, is the three-point shot. He shot 36% from three last year. Rookies in NBA history who have 16 points, 6 rebounds, and 36% from 3. Larry Bird, Paul Pierce, Kyle Kuzma.
Unreal. Thank you for giving the Lakers fans, if they didn't know that ammunition.
It's kind of unbelievable. I think he might be like a 20-point per game scorer. Like, he really is that good offensively.
I agree with you. I think that the entire package, maybe not as a go-to guy. Like, I don't really see him like in isolation. That's not where he plays best. He plays off of closeouts best, in my opinion.
By the way,
as an advantage scorer.
Wild number there too. 92nd percentile in isolation possessions last year.
What was the damn volume on that?
90 or 81 possessions. So, like, not small, but not
good.
top.
God,
he had like 1 a game.
Interesting. Yeah, that's kind of surprising to me. I mean, he wasn't a great shooter off the dribble. That's never been his strong suit. So maybe it was just like a face-up. He could just dribble, spin move you, and get to the basket. Yeah. I don't know. But that's interesting. I think he got some comparisons stylistically to Carmelo Anthony's rookie year. I don't think he's that level of pull-up shooter. They're kind of different. I mean, I think Kuzma is, in many respects, what you'd hope Melo would be. Is more of like, he optimizes his secondary scoring better because he's so aggressive attacking closeout. So I think that combination offensively, if you can play off the ball at a high level, you can create a little bit secondarily. If you can make some skip pass reads, which he did in preseason, that was really noticeable right from the office. He's got pretty good feel offensively. I think that is a really valuable offensive player in the modern game, especially at the 4.
Well, the difference between him and Carmelo Anthony is that he took 150 shots from mid-range last year. Like that. That's it. Like, he took 185 from that, like, floater range, the 3 to 10 foot range, but from 10 to 23 feet, he only took 150 shots last year. Like, he really knows how to optimize his shot distribution. He took 433s, 270 shots at the rim, and 150 shots from mid-range. Like, he knows what he's doing out there. It's how he ended up being darn near league average in terms of true shooting percentage.
And yeah, Carmelo, I never saw the comparison at all. Carmelo is like a catch and like hold guy. He's a jab step you. He wants to shoot, a dribble pull up, like a one dribble. Like, Kuzma's great because he doesn't do that. He doesn't hold the ball. It's like he's catching and he's already going. And I think that's what makes him hard to guard, is because you really have to respect that closeout. And then he's just so damn good at, making plays both for himself and for others in that secondary fashion on the move.
Yeah, and 65% of his field goals last year were assisted. So he's taking a lot of shots off the catch, which I think is really, really smart for him. 64th percentile as a shooter off the catch, 309 shots, 54.9 effective field goal percentage. Very, very good offensive player. I don't think we have any qualms about him as an offensive player. 20-point per game guy is ceiling, probably, right?
Yeah, my only qualm is I don't really see him, regardless of the isolation play type, I never really see him being like a go-to scorer necessarily. I don't think that's how you want to use him, but what makes him, again, so valuable is he can do it without utilizing possessions that way. Like, I think he can be a 20-point per game scorer basically as an advantage kind of scorer, which is really valuable. And
speaking of one of those advantages, before I go to the defense and talking about the disaster that was, he's really good at taking advantage of mismatches in the post, too.
Yep. Which is imperative, by the way.
Yes. Defensively, what do you do?
The sample for me, again, I didn't watch a ton of Lakers basketball last year. I watched enough to have a pretty solid idea, but the physicality has always been the thing that stuck out for me on the interior. Just not a physical player, definitely more finesse. You see that reflected in his offense as well. His team defense wasn't good from what I saw. Like, the rotations weren't timely. He doesn't have the greatest off-ball feel.
He was really bad off the ball, I thought.
Yeah, I agree. And again, I think that he's going to have to win with their scheme. It's going to be more switch dependent. Can he contain ball handlers? I think he's got pretty quick feet. I think where he struggles the most is with the general technique, the fundamentals, and just the team awareness. Yeah,
I generally agree with all of that. And we'll just say, like, I am not sure what you do with him in like a playoff setting, because that's ultimately where the Lakers are, right? The Lakers are trying to make the playoffs now. They have LeBron James, and he's really bad off the ball to the point where I'm worried about him just getting lost, like, pretty consistently. Like, maybe it was a rookie thing and maybe he figures some things out. He played under Larry Kraskowiak, who's a really good defensive coach at Utah. Like, I figured he'd probably have like a little bit more spatial awareness than what he did last year, but very much did not, and that was a problem. Not really like a playmaker defensively. Like, he's not going to block shots, not going to get into passing lanes. He's like fine on the ball, like when he's really engaged and like notices what's going on. But it's a real problem for his game, and like he really needs. That's like where he needs to focus in. He needs to figure out how to stop opposing players from scoring consistently on him.
And I also don't think he's like the most physical rebounder either. Yeah. And I mean, he's not going to start for them. Conceptually, I think he's probably going to come off the bench, and just how the roster's organized, like Lonzo starting with KCP, LeBron, Ingram, and then JaVale McGee, potentially whoever they start at the 5. So he's going to be in more of that scorer role. We'll see how he defends. I'm very interested in seeing how he can hang. I think he has the athleticism, but does he have the IQ? Does he have the physicality to hang in a playoff setting? I think that's going to be really critical for the Lakers, because I think there are going to be times when they're going to want to go LeBron at the 5, and they're going to want to play Kuzma at the 4. And those lineups are going to be pretty unstoppable offensively, in my opinion. It's going to come down to, can they defend well enough?
And the other thing I'll note about him, too, is he's fearless, like, in every way. Like, he's someone who will perform well offensively in the playoffs, I think. Like, I have no real worries about him there.
He has that, I guess, Mike Schmidt's called like a basketball gene. I can't remember what it is, but he's a gamer. Like, that's the ultimate thing, is like, I don't see him getting phased in big moments either. That's kind of what stuck out as a rookie. Like, he immediately stepped in and he wasn't scared of the moment. Like, he was getting his shots. He looked very, very comfortable on the floor. So great. One more strength I should add is he's a great leak out guy in transition. I'm not sure how that's reflected in the stats, but as far as we even saw that in summer league, like his fluidity and stuff, his being on the page with Lonzo, I think that was pretty evident from the off.
Yeah, his efficiency in transition was 27th percentile, but he did it a bunch. Like 23.6% of his offense came in transition. So it was like 0.98 points per possession on those possessions, which is great. Just like in the grand scheme of offense, like, it's pretty good, I guess I should say, not great. The thing that I will note is I would expect that to rebound. Like, there's no reason why he wouldn't be an efficient transition player.
Yeah, I just think he has the instincts. He has that leak out ability. He's got good timing there, and he's pretty fast. Honestly, he can outrun most. If he plays the 4, he can outrun most of the 4s in transition, especially with a little bit of a head start. So I really like him there.
The last guy we're going to break down in like detail here is Josh Hart. Honestly, I don't really know that we have like he is what he is. Like, I don't know. We have to go into like crazy detail here. He is a legit 3-and-D player. He can make threes, 39.6%. He can really, really defend. He plays super smart. He can attack closeouts. Like, everything that you're looking for, Josh Hart can do it.
Yeah, just a really reliable. I mean, I think he's going to be a lower-end starter. I think he's that good.
I do, too.
But really reliable as far as his team defense really stands out. He's so high awareness. There's so many games that in the limited games, I should say, I watched to the Lakers. Every single time he popped as a team defender, just rotating over, challenging shots. His strength is a huge weapon in the post. Like, he can switch on to 4s, even some 5s, and just use his low center of gravity to stonewall guys in the post. So as a defensive guy, maybe not the most elite quickness, but I think he compensates with IQ and his strength level. And then offensively, I think he's one of the best fits on this roster with LeBron. Like, straight up, I think his ability to shoot the ball off the catch is going to be tailor-made for LeBron. He's a smart player. He can attack a closeout. His finishing numbers weren't great last year in the half court. Oh, I'm looking at defense right now, so maybe they are. But his ability to absorb contact, he's a freaking bust when he gets to the rim. Like, he uses his body so well as far as, absorbing contact. He can finish around guys in that capacity. So in Summer League, we saw him a lot more initiator, more primary scorer, a lot of off-the-dribble shots. That's probably not going to be his game at the actual NBA level. I think he's more of definitely a secondary, tertiary option, but he can do those things really well.
Yeah, 52nd percentile as a finisher at the basket last year, 88th percentile as a catch-and-shoot guy last year. Do we think any of what he did at Summer League is translatable as like as an initiator?
I don't think so as like a primary. I do think that he shoots the ball. He's shown enough development as a pull-up shooter to where he can run a secondary pick and roll and make a read. I think he sees the floor well. He's always had some playmaking ability. So I think from a secondary functionality standpoint, he can do a little bit, but I'm not sure how much you really want him doing. Doesn't have the best first step. And I just don't think that's his primary role. But the Lakers don't really play that way, frankly. Like, they want to move the ball in that motion scheme, move around, shoot the ball off motion. But I do think he can do things selectively in a pinch.
Yeah, generally think I agree with that. Definitely more of like a catch and shoot off ball wing that, if you get into a pinch at the end of a shot clock, you might be okay, but not someone that you want like going wild with it. Funny thing about that, by the way, short shot clock, so under 4 seconds last year, he was in the 98th percentile in the NBA.
Go figure.
I'm all about wild small sample size stats.
There we go.
Yeah, I think he's a starter. I think he's going to be a starting quality player in the NBA. This is why I had him as a top I think, 20 draft prospect last year, and I've seen nothing to really change that.
Me as well. And I think that for political reasons, Caldwell Pope probably starts over him. I'm not totally sure that Caldwell Pope's a better player than Josh Hart. Like, if I'm in a big, high-profile game, I think I trust Josh Hart more in those settings, frankly.
I am going to bet right now that the Lakers' best lineup next year is the one that I noted earlier with Lonzo, Josh Hart, Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, Brandon Ingram, and LeBron.
Interesting. So no Kuzma.
No, but Kuzma is still really good. Like, you know.
I'm just trying to put you on the spot here.
Yeah. I like, statistically, I think that's going to be their best lineup.
Interesting.
Let's move on. Let's talk about some of these, like, end of the rotation bench guys. Who do you have next?
I have Steve Mykhailiuk next.
I do too.
It's kind of, it might be reactionary. I'm glad you do too, so I'm not too much in the moment, but I was really impressed by him at Summer League, man. Like, the physicality. I mean, he's never known for his defense. He has the wingspan issues and stuff, but he did fight more than I expected on that end. He showed some spunk, I guess you could call it. So I liked his aggression on that end. He seemed he's going to be a negative defender, I think, but he doesn't have to be like an outlier negative defender. I think that's important for the projection because his shooting, like, good God, watching him shoot in person. Said that's on the Summer League pod, but like every time he shoots the ball, I think it's going in, and like very few players have that effect.
Yeah, like I think he's going to be a significant negative defender, and I still think he's going to be really good because he is an unbelievable shooter. He is an unbelievable shooter who can also attack closeouts, get to the basket, finish at the basket, get out in transition, leak out to the corner in transition, leak out to the wing in transition, and shoot. He's going to be I think he's a rotation shooter in every way.
That's how I see him too. I mean, in Summer League, I mean, he was 30 of 71 on jump shots, 81st percentile. He's not going to get to the rim often. He's more of like a guy who's going to play. He's pretty much optimizing what the Lakers want to do offensively. Guys running off screens, having that kind of off-ball gravity, gives them a dynamic that they don't really have. He's probably the best shooter on the team, like just pure straight shooter off the catch. Yeah. They have some good shooters, but as far as like contrasting him with someone like Lance Stevenson, he just gives them a little bit of a different look. But I agree, he's a reserve. I'm just getting more. I don't think he has to be necessarily like one of the worst defenders in the league. I think that he can be maybe good enough, especially against reserves, to be playable, and you can really optimize his offense.
Yeah. Like, I think there is a non-zero chance he's the worst defender in the league, and I still think he's going to be useful.
Fair enough.
He was really bad for Kansas last year.
Oh, yeah. That's why I didn't really like him that much as a prospect, frankly, but he can shoot it, so there's a role for that.
Who do you have next?
I personally have Mo Wagner.
Okay. Tell me why.
I was kind of impressed with his defensive acumen in Summer League. I'm not really buying it as far as physicality, but I think he moves a little better than he gets credit for, and he gives them a dynamic at the 5 that they don't really have offensively, a guy who can pick and pop and then put the ball on the floor a little bit. His fluidity as far as a ball handler is pretty underrated overall, so if he can make that pick and pop 3 with Lonzo, for example, and then, you know, take a guy off the dribble, make a pass. I'm not really sold on this passing necessarily, but I do think there's some intrigue there. For me, I'm not super high on him. I'm not buying him fully after Summer League. I just like him more than the rest of this list unless I'm missing somebody notable. Yeah, I think that, like, the only other guy you can probably have here is either Zubac or Alex Caruso. I'm all for putting Alex Caruso ahead of him, but I don't think you can. I mean, the Lakers certainly wouldn't. The Lakers would have Mo Wagner ahead of Svi, I would think, just because they drafted him in the first round, and they're tied to him for at least 2 more years, and that's fine, I guess. He can shoot from distance. He is going to be an incredible teammate. Like, he's the perfect end of a bench guy. And his fit with LeBron is particularly good because of that ability to space the floor. I don't have faith in the defense, to be honest, but he still will be able to be useful, I think, with LeBron. And I think especially in the regular season and in the playoffs, I have my druthers about him defensively for sure. But in a certain role, I think he can provide value in a certain matchup. I wasn't enamored with the pick at 25, honestly, but I don't think it's the worst thing. Like, he impressed me more in Summer League, mostly because my idea of him going into that was pretty low. The bar was set low, but I think he maybe impressed me a little bit more. I think optimally, like ideally, if you project forward, I think he's at his best case like a third big who can provide things that a lot of other bigs can't do in the league as far as the ability to shoot and dribble a little bit, and hopefully his passing improves. But I don't see his ceiling as a starter. I don't see him as a starting caliber player in the league. Yeah, I think I agree with that. Zubac or Caruso next? I got to go Caruso, man. That's my guy. I love Caruso.
think I'm here for you on that one. I am a Alex Caruso guy. I think he's a backup NBA point guard.
I just love the way that guy plays. I mean, his physicality and just his energy level defensively. He's not the best athlete, but he's a guy that really gets every single ounce of that functional athleticism on the floor. And his passing anticipation is just freaking absurd, frankly. Like he's one of the he's not one of the best in the league, but he's for his archetype and what he is as a bench player and like a fringe NBA player, I think he probably has the best passing anticipation of any fringe NBA player. Like his passes a pick and roll, just great feel there. He just has to shoot the ball. I mean, that's another thing. He's got to shoot the ball off the catch. But I do think in certain matchups he's going to have a little bit of value. I'm not sure completely if he's an NBA caliber player. I would lean yes, but it's more in like maybe the fourth guard role. He can give you select minutes off the bench.
Yeah, I think that's right. I would also note that he's a very good defender.
Oh, yeah.
Like, very, very, very good defender. That he lost the SEC Player of the Year or Defensive Player of the Year award to Tyler Ulis is one of the craziest things I think I've ever heard.
Man, I did not know that. That is nuts.
Yeah. I wrote a thing on him and why he should have won it when I was at CBS, I think. He was very, very good, I thought. Yeah, generally agree. He needs to shoot it, but even as a fourth guard, like given the fact that he's 6'5", can guard multiple positions, and is such an incredible passer, like I don't know that he really needs to shoot it.
Yeah, I think that's fair for if you pigeonhole him as a fourth or fifth guard or whatnot. And he, again, kind of enables the Lakers to play a little bit of their scheme switching and stuff. Like he's physical enough. He plays aggressive enough. He compensates for maybe a lack of ideal size, even though he has good size and ideal athleticism. We're just playing hard. I think that you can compensate some just by guys who are wired that way and really play with that high level of motor.
Zubac's next. Do we think he's on this roster in 2 months?
I'm going to be flat out honest. I thought they were going to keep Thomas Bryant over Zubac. I was like, I don't want to say totally confident on that coming into the offseason, but I felt pretty good about that, frankly. I just think Zubac is one of the only guys you look at on this roster prospect-wise that disappointed in their second year. Like there was a lot of buzz about him in summer league. People were like, "Oh, Lakers got a steal or whatnot." And then he kind of took a step back. Like he's not good defending in space. That's the ultimate thing. He doesn't really shoot threes. He's kind of like an ideal high usage backup third big. If you really like that kind of guy, a guy who can score a little bit in the post and kind of get on the offensive glass. Ideally, that's the kind of player you're looking at. I don't see it as a lot of value. I would have kept Thomas Bryant, frankly, over him. So I'm not totally sure he both makes this roster, even though it kind of seems like that would be the intention by keeping him past his guarantee date. But I don't know what role. Like, is he going to start for them, or are they going to start? It's not out of the possibility that he starts, which is kind of crazy to me.
I would imagine they start JaVale over him.
I think so, but I'm not totally confident in that.
Yeah, I think you're right. Like, you look at just who they have. I mean, it's one of JaVale, Wagner, or Zubac, if they want to play a true center.
Yep. And like that's not like an easy choice. Like JaVale's fine. Like I would start JaVale personally, but it's not like by such a landslide necessarily as far as their vantage point. I think it's not like a no-brainer. I think they're going to entertain Zubac, which is interesting. Maybe they'll do like a dynamic like the Warriors do, where they start Zubac against like the bigger plotting centers or whatnot. Who knows? Yeah,
I think that's probably right. Now that you say that, yeah, I think he probably will be on this roster now. Yeah, it was a weird year. I was really impressed with him as a rookie, and I was not impressed with what I saw last year from him.
Me too. And he's like the one guy of this list of prospects that I don't think has lived up to the billing of what he was once purported to be. Everybody else has kind of at least a slight positive trajectory, while Zubac is more trending downward. Yeah,
which is interesting in general to me. Isaac Bonga, I guess he has to be next, just given the fact that he's also on a guarantee. I've never been super high on him personally. I understand the appeal. He's 6'9", kind of can play a little bit of point guard. Cause, like he's really only useful in like ball screen scenarios. Like he can't really shoot. He isn't a great explosive scorer around the basket. He's a good passer in ball screen scenarios. He's good at kicking the ball out, good at dumping the ball off. But like, you know, he's always been someone that has left me wanting more every time I've watched him play.
I think that's exactly right. And I could understand the appeal in theory. He's kind of a theoretical player where it's like a 6'9" point forward, right, that can pass like that. But the shooting isn't there. The general athleticism isn't there. He fired some really awesome passes though in Summer League, like when he was attacking the rim, like a couple of nice skips. but I don't know if he's just good enough as far as an athlete, as far as his individual pull-up ability. It's going to come down to the catch-and-shoot shot, frankly, in their offense especially. I don't have a lot of confidence in his ability to shoot off motion. He was kind of disappointing for me at Summer League, frankly. Outside of the flash passes, I don't have a great read on his defense overall, but just offensively, I didn't really see him providing a lot of value, and I think he's far away. Like, I don't think he's going to get minutes for them this year.
Yeah, like he is, he's still 18, so that's good. But to me, he was like a classic draft and stash. The fact that they are like wasting these 2 years of his cheap money, like his cheap contract value, to develop him seems like a mistake.
I agree. You know much better than me if he kind of demanded to come over and whatnot. Maybe that's how he fell a little bit farther in the draft than some maybe anticipated. But I agree. I think he's definitely, for me, he was always a multi-year guy. And you wanted to keep him as a stash guy and just see how he develops as far as his individual skill level, especially as a shooter. Putting him on a guaranteed contract, this is someone who's a project. And I don't know. He's definitely a second contract guy to me.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. Definitely. Like, he actually might be interesting when he's 21, 22 years old. But right now, I don't know what you do with him. Joel Berry, Jeffrey Carroll, Johnathan Williams III. Anyone there?
Not for me, frankly. I don't have strong takes on any of these guys. None of them have ever really popped for me in dynamic fashion. So I'll let you take that away.
Joel Berry obviously is the most famous of that group. I think I like him the least, though. Just like an undersized point guard who isn't going to be efficient on the NBA level. Doesn't really bring much defensively, at least a shot creator and a good passer, but he's only like kind of a good passer. Jeffrey Carroll, probably the most interesting of that trio. If he can shoot it and defend at a higher level. He was in a tough spot this year at Oklahoma State just because they didn't really have any real talent around him. He would have been someone that would have been a priority South Bay guy for me. So I'm pretty much like right on cue with those guys. Johnathan Williams is a multi-position, like 5-position defender who doesn't really have an offensive skill in the NBA right now. Gonzaga's coaches loved him. I know that. Someone that took a little bit of time to get out of his shell. He was super, super shy when he was there at first. Just a general person, and then like as he turned 23 years old, he kind of figured that whole side of it out. Probably should be a like 50K guarantee exhibit 10 guy. Probably would not have been one of the first like 10 guys for me on that list though.
Yeah, that's how I see him. I mean, all these guys obviously have significant flaws in their game. I think I'm with you on liking Jeffrey Carroll the best out of this group. Johnathan Williams, I just never see him emerging as a shooter. I get he's a good athlete, a very good athlete. He can switch, but I don't know how much value that has, again, in the modern game. If you have to prioritize for secondary players, I think you have to prioritize the ability to shoot, unless you are just going to unleash the versatility in someone's game, and I don't think that he's that level of talent. So yeah, all these guys are pretty meh to me, but again, we're talking about guys who are fringe players on the roster. Like the Lakers have so many damn prospects that not all of them are going to get a chance. Not all of them are going to be good. Yeah.
All right, we are done. It's been 2 hours and 15 minutes. Whether or not it ends up being that long, we'll see. Any thoughts?
I mean, I think we covered everybody pretty in depth. The Lakers, it's a very nuanced discussion with them, just because I think you put this very well at the top of the discussion, is you have to address them as prospects and then address them relative to LeBron on the team. And that just takes a little bit of extra time to suss out. Just a lot of, in my opinion, positive players. And they're just it's hard to project the range of outcomes with these guys. Like the Lakers don't have a tier 1 prospect, in my opinion. And for context, those are guys like Ben Simmons, Donovan Mitchell, Karl Towns that we've talked about in the past. It's more like tier 2 and tier 3 guys, but they have a lot of those guys. They're like kind of like the higher end Spurs in that example. Like they have better players, better prospects than the Spurs, and they have more of them.
And those guys are the perfect guys to have as secondary players next to LeBron, next to whoever they bring in next summer as the second star, and as potential trade chips as well.
Very much agree. I think that the Lakers are well stocked. And I mean, we've talked in the past about their mindset as far as a Kawhi Leonard deal. I don't necessarily blame them for wanting to keep a hold of these guys. I think they'll develop in ways we don't expect. Maybe Brandon Ingram turns a corner this year and improves even more than I think. So yeah, very fascinating to see how this plays out with the Lakers.
Yep, no question there. Cole, tell the people where they can find your work.
As usual, at thestepien.com, we have a ton of new content over there. I've written profiles, in-depth breakdowns of R.J. Barrett, Zion Williamson, Nasir Little. We have pieces. We have a piece by Alex Kungo today go up about Jonte Porter, who Lakers fans were obsessed with in the draft last year. So they'll be interested, I guess, just reading about him. So look for that at the Stepien and continue to listen to this podcast.
I think I'm quoted in that one, too.
You are.
Alex is very good. I'm a fan of Alex. Go subscribe to The Athletic. Keep me employed over there. That would be great. I will have something coming on R.J. Barrett tomorrow. I've already written something on the Kentucky prospects and on Kentucky in general earlier this week. I will have another podcast probably Monday or Tuesday, depending on our schedules, I would say at this stage. But yeah, no, other than that, thank you all for listening. And until next time, we'll talk soon. Bye.